Chapter 342. Ning Ke heard two key points from Chen Pipi's words. First, he said that the headmaster had died somewhere. Secondly, he said that second brother was overbearing and the other senior brothers and sisters dared not to say anything even though they were angry. Then he saw Chen Pipi holding eldest brother in his arms as if he was a treasure. Chen Pipi's fat face was full of expectation and ecstasy, but there was no sense of respect or distance. Then he understood two things. Firstly, neither the headmaster of the academy nor the eldest brother cared much about the academy's back of the mountain, nor did they care about the expressions and attitudes of others. That was why Chen Pipi spoke without restraint and behaved without a sense of distance. The one who was truly terrifying or worthy of respect was the unsmiling second brother. Second, Chen Pipi was really a master of lying. Chen Pipi did not know that Ning Ke was criticizing him. He wiped away the snot and tears on his face and held Ning Ke in his arms. He patted Ning Ke heavily and said, "Youngest brother, you have worked hard. This girl is really beautiful." Ning Ke pushed him away rudely and looked back at Mo Shanshan. He could not help but feel embarrassed. He thought that it was not reasonable to praise someone's beauty at the first meeting. This guy really disgraced the academy's back of the mountain. Chen Pipi was not really lustful. In fact, his understanding of the affairs between men and women was even weaker than Ning Ke's. Otherwise, he would not have been beaten up so badly by Yi Hongyu, and he would not have expressed his hatred for women in his first letter to Ning Quebec. Therefore, he only thought that Mo Shanshan was beautiful and had no other thoughts. Ning Ke introduced, "This girl is Mo Shanshan from the Great River Kingdom. She is the last disciple of the Master of Calligrapher, Lord Wang." Chen Pipi was slightly stunned and asked incredulously, "You are the calligraphy addict?" Through the conversation between the Academy's brothers, Mo Shanshan had already confirmed that this person was the legendary youngest powerhouse in the Knowing Destiny state. She was a little surprised and looked at him and nodded. Chen Pipi sucked in a mouthful of cold air and said with a sigh, "No wonder you're so beautiful. But since you and that woman are known as the three addicts of the world, I'd better not provoke you. Do you know that I am a genius among the geniuses in cultivation, the kind of genius to the extreme?" Ning Ke explained helplessly, "Shanshan's eyes are not good. Don't misunderstand." Chen Pipi was stunned and said shamelessly, "Anyway, I don't like people who are similar to Tao addict." Ning Ke ignored him and asked, "Why are you here?" Chen Pipi said, "Ask Sang Sang yourself." At this time, eldest brother finished his inspection of the old brush pen shop. He looked at them and said slowly, "Didn't youngest brother invite us to dinner? When will it start? I'm a little hungry." As soon as he returned to Chang'an, Ning Ke invited eldest brother and Shanshan to the old brush pen shop as guests. He really wanted to thank them for taking care of him along the way, so he wanted them to get in touch with him and enter his real life. Life seemed to be simple and ordinary, but in fact, many of the conversations in the old brush pen shop today were not simple. Eldest brother and Chen Pipi had vaguely revealed some information, but they did not know each other's insistence and judgment, not to mention Ning Ke and the two girls who were involved in the conversation. Perhaps it was because of this that the first formal dinner of the old brush pen shop ended in vain. Sang Sang dawdled in the backyard for a long time. Before the tea was served, eldest brother and the other two left. The Black Ink Garden girls of the Great River Kingdom lived in the VIP department of the Ministry of Rights, and Mo Shanshan was going to meet her fellow disciples there. In Chen Pipi's words, the headmaster of the academy was still playing outside, so eldest brother naturally had to go back to the back of the mountain of the academy to deal with the affairs in the academy. Chen Pipi also left with eldest brother. So when the door of the shop was closed with a slight squeak, the old brush pen shop became a world of Ning Ke and Sang Sang again, quiet and peaceful. Sang Sang steamed a bowl of rice, cooked a bowl of pickled radish and sour bamboo shoots with bacon, and fried a plate of home-cooked vegetables. This was the first meal Ning Ke had after returning to Chang'an. The charcoal basin in the shop was very warm. Ning Ke took off his coat and sat at the table to eat quietly. Sang Sang sat at the other side of the table and ate quietly. From time to time, she would fill a bowl of rice or a bowl of soup for him. No one spoke. After picking up Sang Sang from the pile of corpses by the roadside, the 6 months in the wilderness was the longest separation between the two of them. No matter how long the separation was, it would not make them feel strange to each other. However, Ning Ke always felt a little uncomfortable, especially when he saw Sang Sang gradually growing up. He found that this girl had clearly grown up a lot. After the meal, Sang Sang did not wash the dishes, but began to tell him a story. That day, the old man came into the shop wearing a dirty coat. He said that there was a lucky chance between us and he wanted to take me as his disciple. At that time, I thought that he was already so old and could not eat too much, so I took him in. The story was a little long. Sang Sang's words were concise enough, and it took a long time. During the process, Ning Ke remained silent. He did not ask any questions, nor did he take a sip of the tea at hand. Finally, the story came to the last part. Sang Sang took him to the courtyard, pointed to the 2 urns under the wall, and said, "The one sleeping in the new urn is my teacher, and the one sleeping in the old urn is your teacher." Then she went into the bedroom, fumbled on the bed for a long time, and took out 2 things from a secret place. She handed one of them to him and said, "This is left by Master Yen Sei for you. It seems to be very important, and many people are looking for it." She raised the seemingly ordinary waist token in her hand and said, "This is left by my teacher." In his words, "This is the waist token of the West Hill Divine Palace's great divine priest of light. If I want to sit on the divine throne in the future, I need to wear this token on my waist." Ning Ke looked at the waist token and thought of the 2 bloody cases many years ago. He frowned slightly and felt a little disgusted. Sang Sang looked at him and said after a moment of silence, "The bloody case in the Xianwei general's mansion should be planned by my teacher." He said it was because he once saw a person in the general's mansion who was born with knowledge. "Young master, it was you, right?" Ning Ke nodded. Since he was a child, he had never mentioned to Sang Sang about the blood feud he carried, because he felt that these things had nothing to do with her, and there was no need for her to become indifferent like him. However, he did not deliberately hide anything from her. After so many years, he naturally knew some things that he should know. Sang Sang looked into his eyes and said seriously, "The dark shadow that my teacher is looking for is actually the legendary son of Yama. If he is looking for you, then you are the son of Yama." Although Ning Ke came from another world and his background could be said to be bizarre, he had never associated himself with the legendary great existence, let alone Yama. After hearing this, he was only startled and said sarcastically, "Although in a sense, I have seen Yama once, I know better than anyone that I am definitely not the son of Yama. Your teacher is not only a lunatic, but also an idiot." Sang Sang said, "But there are many people who will believe in my teacher, so we must not let others know about this." Ning Ke thought for a long time and then smiled bitterly. He said with emotion, "You are right. Except for the 2 of us, no one else can know about this, just like the box of notes under the bed." Sang Sang suddenly looked down at the tip of her shoes and said softly, "There is one more thing. Let's talk about it later." Ning Ke looked up at the sky and walked to the wall to pick up the old urn. He said, "I want to bury my teacher first." Sang Sang pointed to the new urn and said, "There is one more." Ning Ke looked at the new urn and frowned slightly. He said indifferently, "This person killed my whole family, Darky's whole village and my teacher. I have fulfilled the Academy's teaching of forgiveness by not smashing this urn." After saying this, he left the courtyard with the old urn and walked to the shop. Sang Sang stood there and thought for a while. Then she walked to the wall and picked up the new urn. The simple horse carriage outside the old brush pen shop was taken back to the academy by eldest brother, as well as the black horse carriage. The big black horse was kicking its hooves in front of the black horse carriage. Ning Ke walked to the side of the carriage and slowly stroked the wall of the carriage. The wall was made of pure steel and cast iron, showing a unique coldness of metal. Those deep and complicated talisman lines seemed to still have the aura of Master Yen Sei. He sat in the carriage with the new urn. After a while, Sang Sang held the old urn and also climbed up, panting. Ning Ke looked down at the old urn and said to the big black horse, "Go to the south of the city." The big black horse seemed to understand human language. The black carriage moved slowly. The wheels rolled over the bluestone slabs, making a fine and clear sound. It was quiet in the carriage. The master and the handmaiden held their teacher's urn and kept silent. After a long time, Ning Ke suddenly looked up at her and said, "Come here." Sang Sang was very happy. She held the new urn and was ready to go. Ning Ke looked at the new urn in her arms and frowned. He said, "Come here. Put the urn over there." Sang Sang looked down at the new urn and looked up at the empty seat next to Ning Quebec. She carefully put the new urn against the seat, walked to the opposite side and sat down beside Ning Quebec. Ning Ke put the old urn at his feet and held her in his arms. They did not speak along the way. Only the sound of the carriage accompanied them. Sang Sang leaned in his arms peacefully. But she looked at the opposite side from time to time, worried that the new urn would fall and her teacher would come out. South of Chang'an, there was a meadow not far from the academy. This meadow belonged to the academy, but few people took care of it. So even in the middle of winter, one could still see knee-high withered weeds and corpses. 2 new graves were erected in the depths of the withered weeds. Ning Ke kowtowed heavily in front of one grave twice. He stood up and looked at the other new grave a few steps away. He said with an ugly expression, "I told you to bury them further away. Why didn't you listen to me?" Sang Sang ignored him and knelt in front of the new grave. She imitated him and kowtowed 3 times. Ning Ke said helplessly, "Now you don't even listen to me." Sang Sang stood up and looked at him. She said, "They're dead. Why did you bury them so far away?" When they picked the urns, they said that they could be neighbors after they were buried side by side. Ning Ke looked at the 2 new graves in front of him and was silent for a long time. Then he scolded angrily, "They're dead. How can they be neighbors? They've turned into 2 piles of ashes. Do they still want to talk and fight? What 2 idiots!" To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 343. The big black horse was eating grass with its head lowered. The withered grass in the middle of winter was tasteless and tasteless. The more it chewed, the more bitter it tasted, like tree bark. It spat it out painfully. It looked up at the 2 new graves in the depths of the meadow. Looking at the little handmaiden, it thought to itself that the 2 of them could become its mistresses. The one who bathed it in the wilderness was better. The one who bathed it in the wilderness was too dark and skinny. The other one was fair and beautiful, and her hands were quite gentle. Thinking of these things, it walked out of the meadow. When it saw the black carriage, its body suddenly stiffened. How could there be such a heavy carriage in this world? Ever since Ning Ke saw her in the meadow that spring, she had been living a miserable life. Could it be that seeing Ning Ke had ruined her whole life? In front of the new grave, Sang Sang lowered her body and brushed off the dirt on her knees. She walked to Ning Ke and cleaned his clothes. At this moment, the sky suddenly started to snow. With a soft bang, the big black umbrella opened above their heads, covering the sky and the snow that squeezed out of the clouds. The master and the servant held the black umbrella and walked toward the carriage outside the meadow. Under the big black umbrella, Sang Sang lowered her head and said softly, "Young master, I really have something to tell you. Don't panic." Ning Ke thought of something and took out a small box from his arms. "I spent half a month in Tuyang City and carefully picked out a gift for you. Do you like it?" In fact, when he left Tuyang City on New Year's Day, he bought this box from a shop on the street. He didn't spend half a month on it, nor did he choose it carefully. However, his expression was very serious, and no one could see any flaws in it. Sang Sang curiously took the box and opened it to find a cute little clay tiger inside. The little clay tiger in the box turned its body sideways, looking charmingly naive. She looked at it and smiled, saying, "I like it. It's pretty." Ning Ke said shamelessly, "Of course. Think about how much energy I spent on it." Sang Sang closed the box and asked, "Who's the pretty lady in the white dress?" This question came too naturally, so it was very sudden. Ning Ke was startled and then said with a smile, "Her name is Mo Shanshan. She is from the Great River Kingdom." Lin 47th Street was very quiet at night, except for the crackling of the braziers in the houses, the soft sound of withered leaves falling on the winter snow, and the special sound of the big black horse's lips. After washing himself from head to toe, Ning Ke leaned comfortably on the North Kong. He took out a waste fire talisman that he had not completely failed in the past and crushed it with his fingers. Then, he rubbed it evenly on his head with both hands and began to rub it. After a while, the remaining warmth in the talisman paper dried his wet hair, making it smooth and black. "Get ready for bed." He happily crawled into the warm quilt and felt the comfortable temperature from the Kong bed. Suddenly, he found Sang Sang kneeling on the bed to make the quilt. He couldn't help asking, "Why did you come to sleep with me?" Sang Sang laid out the bedding, took off her coat and folded it beside the pillow. She said, "I'm a grown-up now, of course I have to sleep in separate beds." Ning Ke was startled and found that this sentence was very reasonable, but he still felt a little unaccustomed. He thought silently for a while, then stretched his hand out of the quilt and flicked his index finger. The candle on the table was extinguished. "Then let's sleep." It was quiet in the room. After a while, there was a sudden rustling sound. Then, his quilt was lifted and a small and slightly cold body crawled in and quietly leaned on his chest. Ning Ke held her and gently patted her back, just like when he coaxed her to sleep when she was a child. He felt the little girl's body in his arms and smelled the scent of her hair coming from his neck. He sighed and said, "It's still so comfortable." Sang Sang nuzzled her head in his arms, looking for the most familiar and comfortable position, and gently responded with a After a long time, she suddenly opened her eyes and looked up at Ning Quebec. She said, "I really have something to say." Ning Ke looked down at her and said after a moment of silence, "I do have something important to tell you." He did not relight the candle. Instead, he took out a heavy ingot of snowflake silver from the corner of the wall and asked Sang Sang to focus on it. Ning Ke moved the Great Spirit in his body to his hands and rubbed the ingot of snowflake silver into a silver rod. Then, he pinched it quickly with his fingers and the tip of the silver rod became extremely sharp. Sang Sang knelt on the brick bed with the quilt on her shoulder and asked confusedly, "When did you learn to juggle?" Ning Ke stabbed the sharp silver rod into his arm. The sharp tip sank deep into his arm but only left a very shallow white mark. Not a single drop of blood seeped out. Sang Sang was very surprised. She poked his arm with her finger and said, "So hard?" "I learned the Great Spirit left by youngest uncle. It was this Great Spirit that made my body like this." The so-called Great Spirit is to absorb the primordial chi of heaven and earth and store it in one's body. Ning Ke looked at the reflection of starlight in her eyes and said after a long silence, "In other words, the cultivation method I am cultivating now is the cultivation method of the Devil's doctrine. To this world, I am a remnant of the Devil's doctrine." Even if he was the son of Yama, it did not affect Sang Sang at all, not to mention the remnant of the devil's doctrine. Was a young master who cultivated the cultivation method of the devil's doctrine not a young master? Sang was stunned for a while and thought of another very important question. She said, well, then what the teacher said might be true. You are the son of Yama. *T. Ning Ke secretly moved his chi and kneaded the silver rod into a silver ball. He shook the quilt and covered the two of them. He said, don't mention those *T things. I want to eat fried egg noodles tomorrow. Sang hummed in the quilt and said, got it. The next morning, Ning Ke went to the academy after eating a bowl of fried egg noodles with scallions, pepper and eggs. Master Yen Sei gave him the horse carriage as a great inheritance, so he naturally took it. The original horse carriage had been paid off. The horse carriage passed through the yellow meadow in the winter morning light and came to the stone gate of the academy. Ning Ke jumped off the carriage and untied the big black horse to let it play by itself. He carried his luggage and walked into the academy. He found the instructor and told some things about the frontier fortress practice. Then, carrying his heavy luggage, he walked past the houses, past the narrow alleys, and walked to the wetland. He looked at the fish swimming listlessly between the thin ice, and then looked at the dense forest in the distance. Finally, he came to the front of the old academy. It was all very familiar scenery and he had a lot of good memories. Although he had not seen it for only half a year, he already missed it very much. The more he missed Chang'an, the less he believed in the city of Wei. Looking up at the open east window of the old library, Ning Ke suddenly understood one thing. The place he missed the most was probably his hometown. He walked through the fog that shrouded the mountain and waved his right hand to drive away the last wisp of fog. Then he came to the wide cliff yard on the mountainside. Looking at the grass, flowers and trees that were completely out of season and the silver waterfall falling from the top of the cliff in the distance, he could not help but feel refreshed and shouted, I'm back. His shout echoed in the empty back mountain of the academy. After a long time, there was no response except his voice, and no senior brother or sister came out to welcome him. Ning Ke could not help but feel a little resentful. He walked along the mountain path to the mirror lake, and then the expression on his face became happier and happier. Although there were still no senior brothers or sisters appearing, he heard someone playing the zither and singing in the forest beside the path. There was a crisp sound of chess pieces falling on the board and the sound of hoes digging into the soil. It must be the burial of flowers. There was a water wheel beside the stream, and the sound of iron forging could still be heard in the house in front of the water wheel. The monotonous and boring sound seemed to have never stopped. Ning Ke was refreshed. He weighed the luggage behind him and quickened his pace. However, halfway there, he was stopped by someone. He looked towards the direction of the voice and saw that the pavilion that had been destroyed by the first primordial 13 arrows in the center of the mirror-like lake had already been repaired. Seventh sister looked at him and covered her mouth with a smile. She waved her hand as a greeting. After a while, second brother, who looked serious, slowly walked out with his high hat. You did a good job in practice this time. Standing by the lake, second brother said slowly with his hands behind his back, looking at the lake and mountains. His tone was calm and unquestionable. In the back mountain of the academy, it was much more difficult to get praise or affirmation from second brother than from the headmaster of academy or eldest brother. Therefore, Ning Ke felt a little flattered and did not know what to say. It's not a big deal to kill Longqing. Senior brothers and sisters spent so much effort to make the primordial 13 arrows for you to shoot that guy. Therefore, it's a matter of course and not worth praising. Second brother looked back at him with a rare hint of praise on his face. He said, but killing Gu Shi in Tuyang City, you did a good job. Regardless of whether Xiaofan was in the city or whether it was the headquarters of the Northeast Border Military, you killed him as long as it was reasonable. You should know that the disciples of the academy pay attention to reason. The reason why Ning Ke killed the military counselor Gu Shi in Tuyang City that day was largely due to the abrupt choice made by the state of the Great Spirit in his body. In hindsight, it did seem a little crazy. On the way back to Chang'an, he had been worried whether eldest brother would teach him a lesson because of this matter. He did not expect that second brother would think so. Second brother seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. After a moment of silence, he said slowly, I have always respected eldest brother, but I respect his cultivation, state of mind, and even his virtue. As for the way of forgiveness and the way of life that he believes in, I have a different view from him. If we really repay evil with good, then what do we use to repay good? Hearing this, Ning Ke thought for a while and asked seriously, then how do we repay evil? Second brother said, of course we repay evil with good. Ning Ke praised, senior brother's words are simple but not simple. There is great meaning in the subtlety. Second brother looked at him and said, this is what our teacher taught us years ago, so you have praised the wrong person. Thank you. I will continue to work hard. This is the first chapter. The next chapter will be around 6 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 344. In Chang'an, handmaiden Sang only had two friends she could talk to. One was Li Yu, the princess of the Tang Empire, and the other was Xiao, Mistress Jian's personal handmaiden. The status of the princess of the Tang Empire and the handmaidens of the brothel were worlds apart. However, Sang's attitude towards them was the same. She was always silent and played the role of a listener. Xiao gently patted the railing twice, looked at Sang beside her, and asked curiously, I've heard of the calligraphy addict. I think she's one of the 3 addicts in the world. Since I've heard of her, she must be very famous. Is she beautiful? Sang nodded. Xiao angrily said, men are really bad. Sang looked at her in confusion. Xiao emphasized and explained, I mean your young master. Sang was even more confused. Xiao looked at her and said anxiously, now everyone in Chang'an knows that Ning Ke brought back a beautiful woman from a long journey. Aren't you worried at all? Sang looked at her and asked seriously, what should I worry about? Xiao held her hand and said worriedly, according to what you usually say, you often sleep with your young master, so it's definitely impossible for you to marry someone else. In the future, you will definitely become his concubine. In the end, he didn't even tell you before bringing a woman home. It seems that he doesn't have any feelings for you. In the future, if that woman marries your young master and becomes the mistress of the household, what will you do? Sang looked down at her hands that were tightly holding the railing. After a long silence, she said softly, young master is getting old and needs to get married. When I first came to your brothel with him, we had been discussing who is suitable to be the mistress. So even if he wants to marry Miss Calligraphy Addict, I won't feel anything. You want them dead? Which part of them are you thinking about? Or do you want them dead? After struggling in the wilderness for more than half a year, you come to the brothel instead of studying in the academy after returning to Chang'an. I really don't know how the headmaster and eldest brother have taught you. Are you really going to live in the mortal world for the rest of your life? Mistress Jian stared at Ning Ke in front of her with dissatisfaction written all over her broad forehead. Ning Ke stood there obediently and did not dare to argue. The woman in front of him was not an ordinary woman. Not to mention that she controlled the rules of the brothel in Chang'an, which was equivalent to controlling his sexual happiness. He did not dare to be the slightest bit presumptuous because of the vague relationship between her youngest uncle and the academy. After the trip to the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine and listening to Lian Sheng's memories, he was sure that the girl named Xiao who died tragically in front of the Lank Temple had something to do with the House of Red Sleeves. Youngest uncle had destroyed the Devil's Doctrine because of the girl's death. Second brother had said that youngest uncle and Aunt Jian were close. What had happened between them? He could have asked Mistress Jian about the girl named Xiao Xiao, but he thought that it was a sad story of the past. He didn't want to make the elders sad again, so he didn't mention it. He suddenly thought that Aunt Jian should be very interested in the news of youngest uncle, so he said, "I have inherited youngest uncle's legacy." Mistress Jian was slightly startled and asked in a trembling voice, "Haran sword?" Ning Ke nodded and answered, "Yes." Mistress Jian looked at him in disbelief and then frowned deeply. She leaned forward slightly and stared into his eyes. She asked very seriously, "Only the Haran sword?" Ning Ke was startled and then nodded again. Mistress Jian suddenly felt relaxed when she got his confirmation. She leaned back tiredly and said, "That's good." Ning Ke looked at her expression and thought that maybe Aunt Jian also knew the truth of youngest uncle's joining the devil. "I don't want you to follow his old path." Mistress Jian looked at him and said earnestly, "If you want the world to admit that you are qualified to represent the academy and enter the human realm, you have to go through a lot of training." When he entered Chang, and on a little black donkey, he was just a little scholar in a green robe. But because he couldn't control his mind, he caused a lot of trouble in the world and finally died without a burial place. So you must remember to keep a low profile this time and don't offend too many people. This was the second time that Ning Ke heard Mistress Jian seriously mention the word "enter the human realm" in today's conversation. He couldn't help but feel confused and wondered what it was. Then he heard that she used youngest uncle to warn him, so he couldn't help but smile and replied, "Don't worry, I'm not as strong as youngest uncle. If there is any trouble, I can just hide in the academy. Don't think that the academy is really the best in the world. If the academy can really solve everything in the world, how could your youngest uncle end up like that? What's the point of cutting all the peach blossoms on the mountain afterward?" Mistress Jian said coldly, and the wrinkles at the corner of her eyes were full of resentment. That was resentment against the academy and even against the headmaster of the academy. According to the law of the Tang Empire, students of the academy were not allowed to join the army after graduation. Therefore, unlike most of the officials in the imperial court who came from the academy and had a close relationship with the academy, the military of the Tang Empire had always been estranged from the academy. Especially recently, the powerful figures in the military, represented by the Defender General of the state Su Shi, had even developed a strong vigilance against the academy, especially those supermundane people in the back of the mountain of the academy. What made this vigilance a reality was a memorial from Tuyang City. In the memorial, the Defender General of the military, Xia Ho, who had made great achievements in the war, earnestly requested to retire. His words were full of fatigue and discouragement. After seeing this memorial, many generals in the military ministry felt sad, especially the bigwigs at the top. They knew that before Xia Ho decided to retire, Mr. First and Mr. 13 of the academy went to Tuyang City and had a long talk with Xia Ho in the winter courtyard. Therefore, they became even angrier. Many people in the military of the Tang Empire did not like Xia Ho, but they insisted that it was the military's own problem. Even if Xia Ho was to be punished, it should be handled by His Majesty or the imperial court, and not by the academy. As for Xia Ho being a visiting professor of the West Hill Divine Palace, it was not a big deal in the eyes of the Tangs who were also believers of Haotian. Of course, no one dared to suspect the headmaster of the academy. It was just that the headmaster of the academy had not appeared in the human world for many years, and even His Majesty had not seen him for a long time. Therefore, the military thought that it was the fault of the back of the mountain of the academy. I believe that if the headmaster of the academy knew about this, he would not allow those people in the back of the mountain to act so unscrupulously. Su Shi said coldly, "Cultivators should cultivate and not interfere with the politics of the court. Just like the two unknown places, deep in the mountains or the wilderness, those outside the world return to the outside world, and those inside the world return to the inside world. Why should they be connected? Why should they enter the human world? How is the investigation of that case? He asked. There is indeed an iron nail in the head of censor Zhang Yiqi. The Chang'an local government protected the evidence well, but they did not continue the investigation at that time. When Xianwei General Chen Zixian died in the iron shop, the old brush pen shop was not open that day. In the early morning after the death of the former military ministry document appraiser Yan Suqing, the Yulin royal guards found a piece of cloth deliberately left by the murderer and found a coat in another yard. Because it was a ready-made garment from the lawn embroidery workshop, this clue could not be traced. However, according to the investigation of the murder scene and the wound on the coat, it can be confirmed that the murderer was seriously injured. A military ministry official said, 2 days after Yan Suqing's death, it was the semester examination of the academy. According to the student's memory, Ning Ke had made an appointment with Xie Chengyun, a scholar of the South Jin Kingdom, to bet on the result of the examination. However, he asked for 2 consecutive days of leave at that time. This matter caused an uproar in the academy, so it could not be faked. Su Shi said coldly, of course he had to ask for leave when he was seriously injured. The military of the Tang Empire was extremely powerful. Once they started a comprehensive investigation of something, they would instantly show extremely strong action and high efficiency. It did not take them a long time to find out so many clues, which was really terrifying. These seemingly inconspicuous clues were like a net, faintly pointing to a vague figure. It seemed to indicate that Ning Ke, a student of the second floor of the academy, had something to do with those murder cases. Nothing can stand up to suspicion, because once you start to suspect, you can seek evidence. As long as you seek evidence, you can find a lot of evidence. Otherwise, who would believe that the core disciple of the headmaster of the academy turned out to be a cold-blooded murderer? Su Shi said expressionlessly, I don't want to know the connection behind these murder cases. I don't want to know who Ning Ke was and what kind of hatred he had with the deceased. I just want to confirm that he did not violate the law of the Tang Empire. After thinking for a moment, the official shook his head and said, the existing evidence is not enough to prove anything. Su Shi frowned slightly and seemed to be a little worried. The official looked at him in confusion and asked in a low voice, actually, even if we really find evidence of Ning Ke's involvement in the case, can we really go to the back of the mountain of the academy to arrest him for trial? General, in my humble opinion, let's just forget about this matter. Su Shi looked at the winter sun outside the window and said slowly, the headmaster of the academy once said that the law of the Tang Empire is the most important. Our Tang Empire is strong and prosperous according to this principle. If the academy breaks the law, it will be the same as the common people. Even if we can't find evidence of Ning Ke violating the law of the Tang Empire, we have to let the headmaster of the academy know about this matter and make Ning Ke unable to be the wayfarer of the academy. After a moment of silence, he said coldly, now it seems that my vigilance towards Ning Ke is indeed right. If the future nation master is such a villain, how can the Tang Empire be at peace? If those foreign cultivators have already entered Chang'an, tell them to provide convenience for them. Tell the Yulin royal guards not to easily try to stop the battle between the two sides. The official from the military ministry trembled slightly and expressed his opposition without hesitation. He said, I object. Even if Ning Ke is a villain, he is after all a Tang man. How can we deal with him by using the hands of foreign people? Su Shi turned around and looked at him with slight mockery. He said, do you think I am such a shameless fool? The official from the military ministry was fearless and replied, I dare not, so I don't understand the meaning of your words. Since we are going to enter the human realm, we have to be tempered. Kuharan was like this in the past, and Ning Ke is the same now. I just want this kind of tempering to be fairer. I believe the academy will not have any objection to my arrangement. Su Shi said coldly, if Ning Ke is guilty, of course he should be punished by the law of the Tang Empire. But now there is no evidence that he has violated the law of the Tang Empire. So I really want him to lose, again and again, until he finally loses all his courage and edges. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 345. Ning Ke did not know that he had become the hero in the novel and was about to face the challenges of countless supporting roles. He would either win or lose, and finally decide whether he was the hero or not, like Long Qing, who was supposed to be the hero but ended up as a side character. After returning to Chang'an from the wilderness, he had been thinking about an important problem. If he could not solve that problem, he would not even dare to cultivate in the back of the mountain of the academy, let alone fight with others. In order to solve this important problem, early the next morning, or to be exact, when it was still dark, he used the waste token of the visiting professor of the Imperial Center Administration to leave Chang'an. He came to the mountain road behind the old library of the academy and waited quietly. At the moment when the morning light appeared in the east, the clouds on the mountain road gradually dispersed. Eldest brother, who was wearing an old coat and straw sandals, slowly walked out. He was surprised to see Ning Ke, who was leaning against the tree and yawning. Ning Ke bowed and asked, "Senior brother, where are you going today?" Eldest brother smiled and said, "I have been traveling with my teacher for the past 2 years and did not know that the imperial court had dredged a large lake under the Yanming mountain in the south of Chang'an. I went there yesterday. The air in the lake was fresh and the water under the ice was clear. There were also fishermen breaking the ice to catch fish. I like it very much, so I am going to see it again today." Ning Ke had a lot of experience in dealing with eldest brother's speaking speed and verbosity. His ears could automatically filter out the nonsense about scenery and mood, and capture the only useful words. However, he did not find any key point in eldest brother's words. He said angrily, "Senior brother, I have a question to ask you." Eldest brother was slightly startled and asked, "Is it very troublesome?" "I still want to see the lake." "How about another day?" Ning Ke said firmly, "Not another day. It can only be today." "Is it long?" "It can be long or short." "Youngest brother, if it is a riddle, then it is not interesting." "Eldest brother, am I such a boring person?" After a short conversation, eldest brother and youngest brother began to climb the long mountain road. "This important question is. I wanted to ask you when we were roasting potatoes by the bonfire in the wilderness, but you said not to. You will ask the headmaster of the academy when you return, but the headmaster of the academy has not returned. Why do I feel that this sentence is also a riddle?" Ning Ke stopped in front of the winter trees that had stabbed him all over. After a long silence, he looked at eldest brother and nodded. He said as calmly as possible, "I have inherited youngest uncle's mantle at the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine." This was the third time Ning Ke heard about entering the human realm in the past 2 days. He looked at eldest brother uneasily. Although he did not understand what entering the human realm meant, he vaguely felt that it was a very troublesome thing. "Senior brother, what is entering the human realm?" "Entering the human realm means returning to the human realm." Ning Ke asked confusedly, "Cultivators go through a lot of hardships to be born into the human realm. Why do they enter the human realm?" Eldest brother smiled and said, "Because cultivators also need to eat." This reason was very strong, because there was nothing more important than eating in this world. However, Ning Ke still could not understand the logic behind it. With the ability of cultivators, how could they not be able to make a living? Moreover, what did cultivators need to eat have anything to do with the academy? What did it have to do with the academy entering the human realm? Eldest brother looked at the sea of clouds beneath his feet and said, "Cultivation is a very extravagant thing. Regardless of whether it is the creation of natal items or other things, they all require a lot of resources. Take your primordial 13 arrows as an example. The bow and arrows need special iron refined steel, which requires extremely precious ores. Why didn't anyone in the cultivation world create similar bows and arrows in the past? On one hand, it is because they lack the wonderful ideas in your mind and the admirable practical spirit of fourth brother and sixth brother. More importantly, they are not like our academy, which has the minds of the entire Tang Empire for us to use. You have to know that your bow and arrows can only be made a few times. Ning Ke knew that the materials needed to make the primordial 13 arrows were very special and rare. However, when the bow and arrows were made, it was fourth brother and sixth brother who were responsible for the specific planning. He did not know that such a bow and arrows needed the resources of the entire Tang Empire. He could not help but be stunned. He suddenly asked, "Are the other unknown places also entering the human realm? I think Tang and Yi Su seem to be wandering in the human realm and have nothing to do with the human realm. The Xiankong Temple is supported by many Buddhist temples. The Jishou Abbey has the West Hill Divine Palace in the human realm. The West Hill Divine Palace is supported by the believers of the world. Most of the world's resources are in the hands of Haotian Taoism. And there is only one academy in the world. This academy is in the southern suburbs of Chang'an, on the land under our feet. It can continue to exist because it is supported by the entire Tang Empire. It is said that the academy is the only holy land that connects the two worlds. In fact, apart from the fact that the headmaster likes to be close to the human realm, the most important reason is that we can only survive if we appear in the human realm. A gust of strong wind blew through the mountains, blowing away the drifting clouds in front of the cliff, revealing the fertile farmland covered in snow below. Indistinctly, the outlines of a few villages could be seen. It was indeed a beautiful world. Eldest brother pointed to that place and said with emotion, "Look at the great rivers and mountains. We cultivators don't produce, but we consume things that ordinary people can't imagine in a lifetime. In fact, we are supported by the most ordinary farmers and miners in these villages, so we should do something for them." Ning Ke looked at the distant human realm below the cliff and asked absent-mindedly, "Then what should we do for them?" "Don't worry, younger brother. The so-called entry into the human realm is just to maintain the connection between the academy and the human realm. It is not a very troublesome thing. You just need to remember that we have to protect the order and peace of the Tang Empire, so we have to remember the principle that the law of the Tang Empire comes first. Then, we have to represent the Tang Empire and the Academy in the process of this world. You have already taken the first step in the wilderness. Then, when someone comes to challenge you, you need to protect the dignity of the Tang Empire and the Academy. How? To put it simply, you have to defeat everyone who dares to challenge you." Ning Ke was shocked and said, "So simple and violent?" Eldest brother said, "The Tao addict has returned to the West Hill. She told people that you are the person with the most similar cultivation philosophy to her. As far as I know, the little girl has always believed that the purpose of cultivation is to fight. Younger brother, do you also think so?" After thinking about it, Ning Ke was sure that Yi Hongyu was right. He was that kind of person. Eldest brother said, "Then isn't fighting the most simple and violent thing in the world?" Ning Ke looked at the gradually closing cloud eyebrows in front of the cliff and frowned. He said, "I always feel that something is wrong. Do I have to fight with anyone who comes to challenge me?" Eldest brother sighed and said, "It is indeed not appropriate. Unfortunately, the academy is very different from the Jishou Abbey and the Xiankong Temple. No one knows where the Jishou Abbey and the Xiankong Temple are, but all the cultivators in the world know where the academy is. Therefore, we can't travel around the world freely like Yi Su and Tang. We can only wait here passively." "Wait a minute. Why do I feel that something is wrong?" Ning Ke said, "Eldest brother, you always play outside with the headmaster. I have never seen anyone enter the back of the mountain. Then where did those who wanted to challenge the academy go? Eldest brother explained seriously, they were all killed by youngest uncle. Ning Ke was stunned for a long time. He asked, what about the years after youngest uncle? Youngest uncle's prestige is still there, and each generation is the previous generation. Do you mean that I am the youngest uncle of this generation? Because you have inherited youngest uncle's mantle. Ning Ke shook his head and asked with some uncertainty, do you mean that the so-called people who enter the human realm are the thugs that the academy uses to keep the peace? If anyone dares to cause trouble in Chang'an, I have to kill him? Younger brother, you can understand it this way. But thug is a little inappropriate. It is probably similar to the front gate protector of the Buddhism sect that Lotus used to be. You have to know that it is really an enviable thing to inherit youngest uncle's mantle. After a moment of silence, Ning Ke said seriously, bluff. Eldest brother, continue bluffing. Sob sob sob, thank you very much for your votes. I can't repay you, then I will write another chapter, sob sob sob. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 346. Eldest brother did not understand what Ning Ke meant, but Ning Ke had been fooled by him to the point of bitterness and sorrow, which had condensed into malice. He wished he could steal the cudgel on second brother's head and knock him out to vent his anger. He thought to himself, you and the headmaster of the academy are sightseeing outside every day, while the others in the back mountain are playing the zither, playing the flute, enjoying the flowers and playing chess. They are living such a happy life, but you throw me, the youngest disciple, into the outside world to suffer in the bitter wind and rain. What's the reason for this? Now that he thought about it, the academy changed the real world to the wilderness, and he had to enter the front gate of the devil's doctrine to inherit the mantle of youngest uncle. Ning Ke shouted with grief and indignation, this is a trap. Eldest brother said with a smile, what do you mean by that? Ning Ke said angrily, why can't other senior brothers and sisters do? Why do I have to be the one to enter the human realm? Eldest brother sighed and said sincerely, you know Bei Gong and the others. They spend all day in the mountains and forests, obsessed with the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, smithing, and talisman Taoism. They know nothing about the world and are as naive as children. It's not suitable for them to enter the human realm, unless you want them to be beaten badly and come back crying in less than 2 days. What about second brother? He's so strong. Jun Mo, he seems to abide by the ancient etiquette and is very upright, but he's too much of a gentleman. He doesn't know how to deal with the situation and is easily forced to the point of no return. His character is a little bit, at this point, eldest brother paused for a while and then said with a bitter smile, he's a little stupid, and he admires youngest uncle too much. If he really enters the human realm, he might really set off a bloody storm in Chang'an. Ning Ke asked again, what about Chen Pipi? He's the youngest in the knowing destiny state. If he were to be paraded on the street, he would immediately frighten all the guys who dare to challenge the academy. There's no need to do anything. He's much more suitable than me. 12th brother's background is a little special, so it's not suitable for him to represent the academy. Eldest brother looked at Ning Ke and said, youngest brother, you're different. You have the strongest aura of the human world, so you can't be at ease in the mountain like us. So you're the most suitable for entering the human realm. This is also the lucky chance I told you in the wilderness. Don't talk about those useless things. Ning Ke said angrily, senior brother has said so much and I finally understand the main point. But you mean that I have seen too many deaths in my life and have rich fighting experience. My heart has been soaked in dirty water for many years. I am not as naive as other senior brothers and sisters. Instead, I am very insidious. And I am not as honest as second brother. I am slippery and shameless. Most importantly, I am not as special as Chunpipi and have a good backer. Although this is the truth, I really don't think so. Moreover, this matter is really not as troublesome as you think. Eldest brother said honestly, but he did not know that his honesty had hurt Ning Ke a second time. Junior martial uncle has also walked this path before. Back then, he rode that little black donkey into Chang'an City and defeated 37 powerful cultivators in the world. He caused a lot of trouble. Who has he been afraid of? Ning Ke was not inspired by these words at all. Compared with the legendary junior martial uncle who had single-handedly destroyed the devil's doctrine, he felt that he was not even a hair. How could he have the confidence to cause trouble? He suddenly thought of an idea and asked, if the enemy is too strong, will the academy help me? Eldest brother said seriously, if the enemy challenges you face to face and challenges you to a duel, the academy can't afford to lose face. Ning Ke said in shock, do I have to fight with the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai, if he comes? Eldest brother comforted him and said, he can't afford to lose face. I think the people who will come to Chang'an City to challenge you in the next few years should be some young people. But there are hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the cultivation sections. Junior brother, although you have made rapid progress, you entered Taoism late and your state is still a little low. So you need to be careful. Senior brother, you know that my state is low, but you still say so. How can I bear it? The state goes from low to high. Don't worry. Why do those people in the wilderness who heard that I was a disciple of the second floor of the academy were scared like quails and did not dare to challenge me? But now that I have entered the human realm, they dare to challenge me? Because that is the wilderness, not Chang'an. You can choose not to accept their challenge in the wilderness, and even their challenge to you can be seen as a provocation to the academy. But in Chang'an, you have to accept their challenge, because this challenge is no longer a provocation to the academy, but an opportunity to show the courage and glory of cultivators. Why? Because you are a Tang and a student of the academy. Ning Ke found it hard to adapt to these unreasonable but vaguely magnificent unspoken rules. After thinking for a long time, he asked confusedly, I have defeated Long Qing. Are there still people who don't know what's good for them to challenge me? Eldest brother said, but no one believes that you defeated Long Qing with your own strength. And Yi Hongyu's evaluation of you after returning to West Hill did not seem to be very high. Ning Ke said blankly, after all, Yi Hongyu is an acquaintance. Why should I tell the truth? Then he began to think about how he should deal with a powerful cultivator like the Tao addict who came to Chang'an and invited him to a duel. Or in other words, how should he admit defeat in a more elegant manner? At this moment, eldest brother reminded him seriously, anyway, you can't lose, because the headmaster can't afford to lose. Ning Ke lost all his respect for eldest brother after hearing that he couldn't afford to lose 3 times in a row. He said bitterly, senior brother, you seem to have forgotten the most important thing. The problem I mentioned to you by the wooden door just now has not been solved. What if others find out that I have joined the devil? Does the academy have to admit that we have taken in the remnants of the devil's doctrine? This is indeed a problem. Although it is not a big deal to be accused of taking in the remnants of the devil's doctrine, it is still troublesome. We have to think of some ways to cover it up. Eldest brother thought for a moment and said, then you don't have to use youngest uncle's great spirit. Ning Ke had thought that he could come up with a wonderful idea, but he did not expect such an answer. He could not help but think of the scene of eldest brother apologizing for being late behind the front gate of the devil's doctrine. He thought bitterly that eldest brother was indeed an irresponsible guy. After the conversation with eldest brother, Ning Ke found second brother and complained about his troubles, hoping to get some sympathy or military support. Unexpectedly, second brother not only did not sympathize with him, but sternly said that this was a rare opportunity for cultivation. He even sighed with emotion at the end that if he had not been famous in the world, no one would dare to challenge him, and there would be no enemy worthy of his attack. He wished he could replace Ning Ke to enter the human realm. Hearing second brother's words, Ning Ke finally understood that the so-called entering the human realm was not the academy throwing him out to be a watchdog to keep quiet, but it was also a kind of cultivation. However, what he was best at in his life was hunting in the forest and chopping off heads at night, so he was somewhat resistant to this kind of cultivation. No matter how resistant he was, he had to accept his fate. So he began to seriously think about how to face the battle invitations that might come at any time in the next few years. According to his previous temperament, he could not admit defeat casually because he might be beaten into ashes by the headmaster of academy. According to his previous temperament, if he met a strong enemy, he would secretly use some insidious means to cut off the enemy's head at night, but he would be beaten into a pulp by second brother. So he found that he really needed help. Sang Sang was naturally the most suitable candidate, but he thought that the process of fighting with those powerful cultivators might be a little dangerous, so he did not want to drag her into it. He also thought that if Spring Breeze Pavilion Old Chow was still in Chang'an, then he would really have nothing to fear. With their strength and tacit understanding in battle, even a great divine priest from the West Hill Divine Palace might have a chance to become famous, let alone the Tao addict. It was a pity that Chao Xiaoshu was not here. Fortunately, at least in the recent days, Mo Shanshan was in Chang'an, and Ning Ke wanted to be a good host. So in the following days, he would go to the residence of the Black Ink Garden disciples every day after leaving the old brush pen shop and take Mo Shanshan to sightsee. Sometimes he would take Cat Girl to a famous restaurant to have a big meal. Thinking that the two had developed a tacit understanding in the wilderness, Ning Ke did not explain too much to the calligraphy addict. However, no explanation often led to problems. In the eyes of those girls from the Great River Kingdom, Mr. 13 of the Academy, who would come to report on time every day, obviously had a different feeling for the Hill Master. Sometimes it was cloudy and snowy in Chang'an, and sometimes it was sunny in winter. Ning Ke and Mo Shanshan traveled side by side. Sometimes they held the same umbrella, and sometimes they looked at the same fish by the moat. When they passed the Spring Breeze Pavilion, he told her the story of the murder on that rainy night. When they climbed the Wanyan Tower, he said that there were many stone statues behind it to see. Sometimes they talked about books and talisman Taoism. Time passed slowly and peacefully. Just like this for a few days, Ning Ke did not meet any big man jumping out of the street, nor did he see a Taoist sword flying toward him. The so-called challenge of entering the human realm had no trace at all. He thought that this was right. With the Academy's reputation, which cultivator would be so bored to come and challenge him? He no longer worried about this matter. That day, eldest brother made him vaguely understand the Academy's attitude toward joining the devil. With a beautiful female talisman master accompanying him, he could not help but be in a good mood. He thought that the Academy's title of entering the human realm was quite magnanimous. According to what eldest brother said, the Academy had the responsibility to help the Tang Empire advance in an orderly manner. Didn't that mean that after a few years, he could also express his opinion on who would be the Tang Empire's emperor? Thinking of these things, he could not help but feel proud. On a day when the winter snow was gradually melting, Ning Ke held the big black umbrella and waited outside the Ministry of Rites. He and Mo Shanshan had made an appointment to go to the Forest of Steels to see the calligraphy of the predecessors. However, not long after Mo Shanshan walked out of the Ministry of Rites, a young monk in a thin frock also followed the two of them. He put his palms together and asked politely, "May I ask if you are Mr. 13 of the Academy? My bad brain made a mistake. It's about the relationship between the Academy and the military. But in fact, this mistake happened before, not today. Hua Shangyue should not have studied in the Academy. Because earlier, when Li Yu talked about Ning Ke's future, I had already confirmed that after graduating from the Academy, he could not join the military. But later, I forgot about it, so I made more mistakes. There are many things in the outline, including Ilan. So I can only change the rule that after graduating from the academy, and I will change it when I am free. Sorry. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 347. The young monk was about 25 or 26 years old. He was handsome and kind, with a slightly dark complexion. His thin robes fluttered in the wind, making him look otherworldly. However, it was still winter, and no one knew why he was not afraid of the cold. Ning Ke felt a little wary, but he did not show it on his face. He smiled and asked, "Master, do you know me?" The monk smiled and said, "This poor monk guessed." Ning Ke asked in surprise, "You guessed it?" The monk said calmly, "Because I have seen the calligraphy addict, so I guessed that you are Mr. 13. Ning Ke thought of the rumor that had been spreading recently and could not help but laugh bitterly. Mo Shanshan looked at the young monk, and her eyes gradually focused. She thought of the scene when they met years ago, and said with slight surprise, "So it's senior brother Guanhai. How have you been? Why are you in Chang'an?" Through her introduction, Ning Ke found out that the young monk was Guanhai, the last disciple of the Lank Temple elder. His expression suddenly became a little strange. This world was different from the one Ning Ke had lived in. Not every housewife was a master of both Buddhism and Taoism. Compared with Haotian Taoism, the influence of the Buddhism sect was much smaller, and the Dharma was not prosperous. However, the Lank Temple was too famous, especially to ordinary people. No one knew about the Xiankong Temple, but they all knew about the Lank Temple. To cultivators, the Lank Temple had a higher status than the White Tower Temple of the Yueluan Kingdom. Even Ning Ke, who did not know anything about the Buddhism sect, had heard of the Lank Temple and had a deep impression of it. Too many stories had happened in the 1,000-year-old temple. Master Lotus had become famous because of his debate with the Lank Temple elder. Later, he had secluded himself in the temple for several years. The bloody case of the destruction of the Devil's Doctrine, which had completely changed the face of the cultivation world, had also started in front of the Lank Temple. Ning Ke had first heard of the Lank Temple when Prince Longqing first entered Chang'an. Longqing had also become famous because of his debate in the Lank Temple. Thinking of this, he could not help but wonder if cultivators in the world who wanted to become famous had to go through the Lank Temple and participate in the debate organized by the Lank Temple. Because of these stories, the Lank Temple had a special status in the cultivation world. The elder who lived in seclusion in the back of the mountain was even more senior. Since the young monk in front of the umbrella was a disciple of the elder of the Lank Temple, he should have a higher status than the legendary 7 disciples of the Buddhism sect. According to Ning Ke's character, he should have gotten closer to this young monk called Guanhai. However, he had been wary of other sects coming to challenge him because of the so-called academy's entry into the human realm. Now that he suddenly saw someone from the Lank Temple appear in Chang'an, he could not help but feel uneasy. "So it's the Vedanta of the Lank Temple. I don't know why I didn't see you in the palace," he said with a smile. The young monk said that he did not dare and said respectfully, "I don't dare to call myself Vedanta. Moreover, my master bowed to the headmaster of the academy as a disciple. How can Lin Hai bear the title of senior brother, Mr. 13? As for the matter in the wilderness, the temple has also received an edict from the Divine Hall. However, the disciples of the Buddhism sect pay attention to cultivation and do not get involved in the mortal world, so we did not go." Hearing these words, Ning Ke thought to himself that the monk would not covet fame if he did not mess with the mortal world, so he probably would not make trouble for him. Ning Ke felt a little relieved, and when he saw the admiration in the monk's clear eyes, he felt very comfortable. He asked gently, "Senior brother, what business do you have in Chang'an? No matter if it was a sedan chair or a bamboo sedan chair, it always needed 2 people to carry it. That was why Lin Hai did not dare to admit that he was the senior brother. However, Ning Ke insisted on calling him that. From this, eldest brother was right. He was indeed the best candidate for the back mountain of the academy. Lin Hai took out an envelope wrapped in yellow cloth and said, I changed my documents at the Ministry of Rights and was about to leave the city to go to the academy. I did not expect to meet Mr. 13, so I can send this invitation to you and slack off. An invitation to the academy? Ning Ke opened the yellow cloth and found that the envelope was not sealed. He took out a very thin piece of paper. The content of the paper was simple and clear. It was an invitation from the Lank Temple elder to the academy to send someone to attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival next year. After the conversation with eldest brother, he was very clear that if the academy had any secular affairs in the future, they would be handled by him. Then he would definitely attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival in the Lank Temple. Fortunately, there was still more than a year's time, so he could prepare well. Moreover, he could confirm that the person from the Lank Temple was here to send an invitation, so he could not help but feel more at ease. He looked at Guan Hai and said with a smile, Senior brother, you have come from the Lank Temple, so you should be a good host. However, I have made an appointment with the Hill Master to travel together. I will drink tea and chat with senior brother at night. Is that okay? Monk Guan Hai replied respectfully, Mr. 13, you are too polite. I have come to Chang'an under the orders of my master and have already slowed down my studies. Since I have already sent the invitation to you today, I will return to the temple later. Let's go, let's go. I have to return home, Ning Ke thought happily. However, on the surface, he was extremely enthusiastic and tried to persuade him to stay. He even put on a fake angry look that was unique to men from Hebei County. Monk Guan Hai refused repeatedly and said, I really cannot delay my studies any longer. It is just that it is rare for me to come to Chang'an and meet Mr. 13 in person. I have some problems in cultivation and hope that Mr. 13 can give me some advice. No problem at all. Speaking of which, I will book a table of vegetarian noodles at the Building of Pines and Cranes in the evening, along with 2 jars of vegetarian wine. You and I can drink and chat, or even have tea. We can discuss it in detail then. What did you say just now? Ning Ke spoke in high spirits and fully acted like a person from the academy who had entered the human realm. It was only then that he came to his senses. There were many things in the world that did not need to be said clearly and could not be said clearly, because if it was said too clearly, it would make both parties feel embarrassed. People who came from places like the academy, the West Hill Divine Palace or the Lank Temple usually had to pay attention to their demeanor. Since they were cultivators who had not entered the human realm, how could they act like hooligans in the secular world who would pick up a watermelon knife and slash at the other party's chest or bald head without saying anything or saying a few harsh words? Even if they wanted to fight, they had to find prettier clothes and a better reason for it. People like Ning Ke and Yi Hongyu, who fought as they pleased and never cared about their demeanor and only wanted to win, were rare in the cultivation world. As for the prettier clothes and the better reason, it was nothing more than to ask for advice on the problems in cultivation and to discuss the state of cultivation with each other. Without all these external appearances, the naked truth was to ask for a fight. After confirming that the monk from the Lank Temple had issued an invitation for a fight, Ning Ke's expression changed slightly. Looking at the monk's slightly dark cheeks, he could not help but think of Sang Sang and Zhua, her skin color. He thought to himself that he seemed to be going against people with skin color like that for the rest of his life. After a moment, he said sincerely, a monk is merciful. Why do you care about the superficial reputation? Monk Guan Hai said with more sincerity, I have been cultivating in the temple for many years, and I have often heard the elders talk about the past of seeking guidance from the headmaster. I know that the academy is a first-class place in the world, and I have always yearned to visit the academy. Chapter 348. There was a large lake by the Yanming Mountain in the south of Chang'an. It had just been dredged in the early autumn of the 14th year of Tianqi era. The mortar in the stone embankment along the lake still had a fresh smell. In the deep winter, the lake water had already frozen. The turbid air in the air seemed to have turned into dust on the ice, making it look exceptionally fresh. Ning Ke had heard about this lake from eldest brother a few days ago, so he came here after leaving alone with an umbrella. He sat in the snow for a long time. He did not see eldest brother's figure, but he saw the fisherman who broke through the ice net that eldest brother had mentioned. He looked at the nooses that creaked as they turned, and the horses that were panting on the ice as they tried their best to turn the nooses, dragging the huge fish net under the ice. He was silent, and no one knew what he was thinking. Guanhai, the last disciple of the elder of Lank Temple, was the first direct challenge he had encountered after entering the human realm on behalf of the academy. If he retreated today, it would definitely have a very serious impact on his state of mind in cultivation in the future. If he did not dare to accept the challenge, then how could he challenge Xia Ho in the future as eldest brother had said? The reason why he had struggled and hesitated for such a long time was that he had joined the devil. He was very worried that he would not be able to control himself in the fierce battle and expose the fact that he had joined the devil. Even if he could forcibly control himself, the great spirit that youngest uncle had inherited was his most powerful strength. He could not use the primordial 13 arrows in a battle to prove the state of cultivation. If he could not use these two most powerful weapons, how could he defeat a cultivation powerhouse like Guanhai? Without the great spirit and the primordial 13 arrows, Ning Ke was still a cultivation loser who had only opened 10 acupoints in the ocean of Qi and mountain of snow. His psyche power controlled the flying sword as if he was crawling. Besides Sang Sang, he had not found his natal item. In Chen Pipi's words, even if he entered the knowing destiny state in this state, it would still be meaningless. Ning Ke sat in the snow by the lake and looked at the grass in front of him. He suddenly thought of the talisman that covered the sky in the garden of Tuyang City and the military counselor Gu Shi who had cast countless talismans in an instant. He stretched out his right hand and flicked his cotton sleeve lightly. A piece of light yellow talisman paper fell on the surface of the ice. With a sizzling sound, it turned into an extremely weak flame. Then, it instantly dimmed and was easily extinguished by the layer of ice on the surface of the lake. Although Master Yen Sei was sure that he was the most potential successor of the Divine Talisman Master, the potential was not equal to the strength. Talisman Taoism was originally a relatively difficult and dangerous way of cultivation. How could it be possible to achieve it quickly? Ning Ke looked at the busy fishermen and horses on the lake in silence. He had once practiced flying swordsmanship by the mirror lake of the academy. He had once broken through the realm and entered the see-through state by the bright lake of the devil's doctrine. However, he had sat by the nameless lake at the foot of the Yanming mountain for a long time today, yet he had gained nothing. Time passed slowly but surely. The snow had long stopped, and the clouds above Chang'an had all dispersed. The sun was gradually setting, and the red twilight shone on the pure white ice, as if the whole lake was about to be ignited. Looking at this breathtakingly beautiful scenery, Ning Ke's heart was slightly moved. He remembered that his master had once told him that when writing talismans, one should keep the shape and forget the meaning, but when casting talismans, one should concentrate the qi in one's heart. He had a deep understanding of the meaning of keeping the shape and forgetting the meaning when he was reading books on the second floor of the old library. Then, how should he explain the 4 words, intentional but unintentional? If the word, intentional, referred to the psyche power, then what did the qi refer to? Of course, it was the qi of heaven and earth. The so-called casting talismans was to use the psyche power to activate the meaning of the talisman characters on the paper, and then use the natural aura contained in the talisman characters to influence the surrounding chi of heaven and earth. If the talisman characters were strong enough, then the influence would appear in an unimaginable way, such as burning, being still, reversing the flow of mountains and rivers, and even turning the world upside down. To reverse the flow of mountains and rivers and turn the world upside down, that was an amazing talisman that could only be written by a sage who was countless states higher than the divine talisman master. Ning Ke was now infinitely far away from that state, and the talisman characters he wrote now were too weak. They could only mobilize a very small amount of chi of heaven and earth, and could only be used to dry the hair and warm the body of the little handmaiden and the young talisman master in winter. It was even a little difficult to light the firewood in the stove, let alone use it to fight against the enemy. However, although the talisman paper was weak, what if it could mobilize enough chi? It was like a little girl at the corner of the street holding a match that could be blown out by the cold wind at any time. But what if a barrel of gunpowder suddenly appeared above the match? Well, this idea was a little too cruel, but it seemed to make some sense. Ning Ke looked at the lake that seemed to be burning, and a trace of joy gradually appeared on his face. For a traditional talisman master, his idea at this time was completely deviant and meaningless, because as everyone knew, the chi of heaven and earth was distributed in a relatively balanced state in the fields, mountains, rivers, and lakes. Even if there were slightly more famous mountains and rivers, it was far from that level, because Haotian was fair. However, Ning Ke was not a traditional talisman master. He was a talisman master who had joined the devil. During these days from the mottled walls of the front gate of the devil's doctrine to Chang'an, his body had been slowly absorbing the chi of heaven and earth in nature, and then storing it quietly in the depths of his body, turning it into his own Great Spirit. The Great Spirit was also chi, and it was many times more condensed and pure than the chi of heaven and earth in nature. The yellowish talisman paper trembled slightly in front of him. It was unknown whether it was because of the wind blowing on the lake, or because Ning Ke's hands were trembling, or because it felt the horrible aura that was pouring into his thin body. A wisp of Great Spirit entered the talisman paper, and Ning Ke flicked the talisman paper to the ice on the surface of the lake. At the moment before the talisman paper floated away from his fingertips, the psyche power in his sense of perception burst out at the same time, and instantly fell on the talisman paper. It seemed like a simple action, but in fact, it required the movement of the body in the psyche power to be absolutely consistent, without any mistakes. An ordinary person would definitely not be able to do this, but Ning Ke had experience with talisman arrows, so he was very familiar with it. As the yellowish talisman paper was triggered, a very slight dryness seeped out from the paper. According to the concentration of the chi of heaven and earth by the lake, this slight dryness could at most form a very small flame, and then fell on the surface of the lake, and instantly extinguished like the previous talisman paper. However, this time, the slight dryness instantly turned into a ball of blue fire. That was the Great Spirit that was attached to the talisman paper, but had not had time to float back to heaven and earth, and was burning. Looking at the blue flame floating in the air, Ning Ke did not know whether it was a success or a failure. This time, it obviously felt different from when he cast talismans in the past, but why did the size of the flame not change significantly? As he was thinking about this, the blue flame had already fallen on the surface of the lake. After a very slight sizzling sound, the blue flame instantly disappeared without a trace, and a hole the size of a bucket appeared where it fell on the ice layer. However, looking from the shore of the lake, it was unknown how deep the hole was. With a splash, a fat fish jumped out of the hole, and flicked its tail on the ice surface. It turned out that the seemingly inconspicuous blue flame had actually burned through the thick layer of ice on the lake in an instant. The loud chants of the fishermen sounded on the ice layer in the distance in the lake. The work of breaking the ice net to fish had reached the most critical moment. With the hard work of the horses, the capstan turned faster and faster, and the fish net under the ice was dragged faster and faster. Gradually, a big hole appeared, and countless fish were desperately struggling in the net. Countless people on the lake shore cheered and cheered. Ning Ke looked at the fat fish bouncing on the ice not far in front of him, and smiled happily. He got up and patted off the snow and grass on his body, and then left in the deafening cheers. Chang'an was exceptionally beautiful and peaceful in the winter at dusk. It was just like Ning Ke's mood at this moment. He walked into the tea shop and looked at the two people who were whispering to each other by the window. He suddenly smiled and said, "Talismans can really change the world." Mo Shanshan looked at him quietly, and somehow felt that there was something different about him now compared to the him on the street earlier. Then Ning Ke turned to look at the monk Guan Hai, and said calmly, "Whether it is to study or to ask for advice, please." The monk Guan Hai stood up and looked at him with a slight frown. Just like Mo Shanshan, he felt that Ning Ke was slightly different from before. However, it had only been half a day, so what could have happened? Looking up, he saw the winter tree with withered branches like arms, and behind the branches was the palace wall. Ning Ke withdrew his gaze and walked into the southern gate Taoist temple at the foot of the imperial city with Mo Shanshan and Guan Hai. Looking at the Taoist with the yellow paper umbrella in front of the temple, he said softly, "Senior brother Ming-Chi, I would like to borrow the land." Ming-Chi looked at the slightly tanned monk and said with a smile, "Master Guan Hai is the earliest." Guan Hai put his palms together and bowed. Ming-Chi looked at Ning Ke and said softly, "Master is not in the temple, but since this is the matter, I will make the decision." Ning Ke said, "Thank you, senior brother Ming-Chi." Ming-Chi shook his head and said, "Mr. 13's first battle in the human realm will be held in the Southern Gate Taoist Temple. This will be recorded in the history books in the future. Who would be stupid enough to keep you out?" The door of the temple slowly closed. Ming-Chi looked at Mo Shanshan and said, "What do you think of the outcome, Hill Master?" Mo Shanshan looked at the closed door and said, "I thought Ning Ke would definitely lose, but after half a day, I am not so sure." Chapter 349. Ning Ke had deliberately chosen the main hall of the Southern Gate Temple as the battlefield. The sounds of battles between cultivators were too shocking and could not be carried out in the streets. He did not want too many people to see him attack, so he needed to choose a sealed space. That space had to be large enough, because only then could cultivators who cultivated different methods feel that it was fair. The main hall of the Southern Gate Taoist Temple was very large. The black beam at the top was like a line across the sky. The space was so wide that it could fit an entire 1,000-year-old tree and a dozen rockery. However, there were no tall trees or rockery in the hall. There weren't even any tables or chairs. There were only beams and pillars at the side, which made it look especially spacious. The black wooden planks on the floor seemed to have no end. Ning Ke and Guan Hai sat cross-legged on the straw mats at the two ends of the black floor, facing each other. The two nodded to each other. Ning Ke said, "I have no knives or arrows, only talismans. Today's battle will be fought with talismans." Monk Guan Hai said, "I have the emblematic gesture of Buddhism and the Buddhist hymn to protect myself." The hall was too spacious, and their voices kept echoing on the black floor. Monk Guan Hai continued, "I want Mr. 13 to know that my respect for the academy is real, and my admiration for you is also real. However, I only want to win today's battle because I regard my teacher as a Buddha, but my teacher regards the headmaster of the academy as a Buddha. All these years, every time I think of this, I feel angry. In order to get rid of this anger, I must defeat you today." Ning Ke looked at the monk in the distance and said, "If you want to defeat me, please make your move." Monk Guan Hai said, "It is not right for a Buddhist disciple to act rashly." "How can you make the first move?" Ning Ke said after a moment of silence, "If I make the first move, you won't have the chance to make your move." Monk Guanhai raised his right palm in front of him and smiled without saying anything. Ning Ke did not know that the monk's gesture was the solemn Dharma idol of the Buddhism sect, but he could clearly feel an extremely pure Buddhist aura suddenly appearing in the spacious Taoist hall. It was clear and indifferent, making people feel that they did not want to fight. However, since it was a battle, how could they not fight? Ning Ke placed his left hand on his knee and raised his right hand slowly. With a flick of his fingertips, a yellowish fu paper slowly floated out. The doors and windows had long been closed and there was no breeze in the hall. However, for some reason, the fu paper seemed to be able to borrow the wind. Like a fallen leaf in the autumn wind, it floated through the entire hall and fell towards Monk Guanhai. When the piece of talisman paper floated 2 feet in front of Monk Guanhai, he suddenly bent the index finger of his right palm in front of him. With this action, the Wisdom King Dharma image of his body became complete, and the aura around his body suddenly became several times thicker. In front of this powerful and thick Buddhist aura, the faintly yellow talisman paper seemed so weak, like a fallen leaf in the autumn wind. However, as soon as the two met, the talisman paper instantly burned fiercely. In a very short period of time, it expanded into a huge fireball and enveloped Monk Guanhai's body. In the face of such a fierce talisman fire, Monk Guanhai's expression did not change. He even slowly closed his eyes. The middle finger of his right palm, which was erected in front of his chest, bent again. The image of the Wisdom King, whose body resembled his, had an additional sense of calmness and gentleness. The aura of heaven and earth in the hall was affected by this calmness and fell gently, forming an extremely thin barrier around his body. The flames enveloped Monk Guanhai's body, burning the extremely thin barrier of the chi of heaven and earth. It made a strange crackling sound, as if dry firewood was being burned, or like a kettle being boiled dry. However, between the swaying flames, one could clearly see that Monk Guanhai's eyes were calm. The invisible barrier was still stable and was not affected at all. The talisman fire relied on talisman intent and could not last long. When the talisman intent on the fu paper dissipated into the air, the flame that enveloped Monk Guanhai's body also gradually extinguished. The invisible barrier reflected the last remnants of the flame, shining brightly like a very beautiful glass cover. At this moment, Monk Guanhai opened his eyes inside the cover and looked at Ning Ke, who was sitting on the straw mat opposite the hall. His gaze was calm and firm. Next, it seemed that it was the powerhouse of the Buddhism sect's turn to counterattack. However, Ning Ke had said that if he attacked first, Monk Guanhai would not have the chance to attack again. And that was exactly what he did. Just as the talisman fire burned the invisible barrier of the chi of heaven and earth around Monk Guanhai, the second talisman paper had already quietly floated out of his sleeve and floated towards Monk Guanhai along the dark mat floor. When the talisman fire finally dissipated and Monk Guanhai opened his eyes to counterattack, the talisman paper began to release a majestic talisman intent. A majestic rainstorm fell from the sky. However, they were now in the Taoist hall. The hall had a roof, so where did the sky come from? The rainstorm was generated out of nowhere from the air about 30 feet high in the Taoist hall and then fell down. The scene was extremely strange. Monk Guanhai's Wisdom King Dharma idol could condense the chi of heaven and earth into Wisdom King armor. When cultivated to a high level, it could isolate all the invisible and intangible forces in the world, such as psyche power and fu fire. However, the heavy rain falling from the Taoist hall was real and the invisible barrier could not stop it at all. In an instant, Monk Guanhai was drenched from head to toe. The slightly cold rainwater flowed down his thin monk's robe and also on Monk Guanhai's slightly tanned face. He looked at Ning Ke on the straw mat in the distance and was extremely puzzled. Why was the second talisman a water talisman? The fierce Fu fire earlier confirmed that Ning Kei's attainments in talisman Taoism were indeed profound. If he had not cultivated the Dharma idol of heaven, he was afraid that he would have been at a great disadvantage. However, water was the softest and weakest thing in the world. If one wanted to defeat the enemy with just a water talisman, one had to cultivate to the state of a divine talisman master. Only then could one accumulate all the water in the world and turn it into the strongest and strongest. However, Ning Kei was clearly very far from being a divine talisman master. The rainwater dripped on Monk Guanhai's face, washing away his puzzlement and doubts. The rainwater seemed majestic, but in fact, it did not cause any harm to him. He decided not to think about these questions anymore. The middle finger of his right palm suddenly flicked out in front of him, and the fingertip flicked a raindrop that had slipped into his eyes. In fact, Monk Guanhai's finger did not really touch the raindrop. It was only his intention that touched the raindrop, and then the raindrop understood his intention. With a swoosh, it cut through the space in the hall and attacked Ning Kei's face, as swift as a feather arrow. Ning Kei did not seem to see the raindrop. He did not make any movement to avoid it, and only lowered his head. Through the waterfall-like curtain of rain in front of him, Monk Guanhai could vaguely see the raindrop enter Ning Kei's hair. He could not help but be slightly shocked. He thought to himself, if he really hurt Ning Kei, how would the Lank Temple explain it to the academy? However, unexpectedly, the raindrop did not seem to have any effect on Ning Quebec. He only quietly lowered his head. And the third talisman he had cast had already floated in front of Monk Guanhai. Just as the rainstorm in the hall gradually stopped, he suddenly released all the talisman intent. The pure aura condensed on the talisman seeped into every drop of water. The rainstorm suddenly stopped, but the rainwater was still on Monk Guanhai's body, flowing on the dark matte floor. As the talisman intent seeped in, the rainwater quickly froze at a speed visible to the naked eye. The water flowing on the floor turned into a miniature glacier, and the rainwater falling on Monk Guanhai's head turned into a miniature ice waterfall. A strong chill shrouded the empty Taoist hall. The rainwater in Monk Guanhai's monk robes and on his face all froze. His eyelashes turned into icicles under the eaves in winter, and his entire body was covered with a layer of transparent ice armor. He looked like an ice Buddha statue. The water between the ice Buddha statue and the dark floor had also froze. Those who had lived in the cold knew that being frozen like this was even stronger than sticking asphalt. Monk Guanhai's entire body was frozen in the ice and could not exert any strength. It was impossible for him to get out of this predicament in a short period of time. It seemed that he could only wait to be easily defeated by Ning Quebec. However, although Monk Guanhai was not famous, he was after all the last disciple of the Lank Temple's reclusive elder. His cultivation in Dharma was even higher than the 7 disciples of the Buddhism sect. How could he be defeated by these talismans? Monk Guanhai was frozen in ice. His body could not move, but his heart could. His lips could not move, but his mind could. A deep and compassionate voice sounded from his chest. It was hard to understand, but it was very solemn. It was the Buddhist hymn. As the Buddhist hymn rang through the empty Taoist hall, Monk Guanhai's eyelashes trembled slightly. The frozen ice on them fell, and the ice armor on his thin monk robes cracked inch by inch. The ice on his sleeves melted, and his hands finally regained their freedom. Monks used their hands to worship Buddha. Therefore, the most important part of the Buddhism sect's cultivation was also the hands. Monk Guanhai's hands regained their freedom. Without hesitation, he clasped his palms together. 2 Wisdom Kings Mudra appeared on the left and right sides. A strong Vajra spirit suddenly gushed out from his body, easily shattering all the talismans around him into pieces. Tens of thousands of pieces of ice floated around Monk Guanhai. The last rays of twilight outside the hall leaked in through the cracks of the window. They were reflected and refracted by the tens of thousands of pieces of ice, turning into countless golden rays of light. Monk Guanhai's body was in the golden light. The Wisdom King's Dharma idol had finally reached the perfect state. At this moment, Ning Ke raised his head and looked quietly at Monk Guanhai in the light of Buddha. His left hand, which had been resting on his knee, suddenly tightened and crushed the talisman that he had been secretly holding for a long time. Ning Ke had used the bag that Master Yen Sei had left for him by the Daming Lake. After observing the meaning of the talisman, he had comprehended the first talisman of his cultivation life on his journey back to Chang'an. It was the scatter talisman that he was casting now. This scatter talisman did not float to Monk Guanhai. Because it was a talisman of movement, Ning Ke could not use the Dharma access that he had comprehended at the Winter Lake on the Yanming Mountain. The talisman's meaning was far away and seemed a little weak. Monk Guanhai, who was in the golden light, frowned slightly because he could also feel the weakness of this talisman. Ning Ke's target of casting the scatter talisman was not him, but the tens of thousands of pieces of ice that shrouded him. As the meaning of the scatter talisman fell, the tiny pieces became even smaller. What was even smaller than the ice was dust. Ice was water. The dust that the water turned into was either cloud or fog. Countless clouds and fog filled the Taoist temple. It was as if the world had suddenly come to a sea of clouds high in the sky, blocking all vision and even disturbing all the aura of heaven and earth. At this moment, the clouds and fog suddenly fluctuated. The clouds and fog dissipated slightly, and Ning Ke's figure appeared. His figure had already arrived in front of Monk Guanhai. He was so close. There are still 30 minutes left. This is the third chapter. As I said, I have nothing to repay you with, so I have to write another chapter. At least I will finish writing this battle tonight, but it may be a little later. Thank you very much. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 350. Many students hoped that I could write a chapter to sell my cuteness or something, but this chapter might be difficult to sell cuteness. Firstly, I'm a little emotional at the moment. Secondly, I want to write this important chapter seriously. Thirdly, I'm really exhausted. Now, I'm going to talk to you in a serious and lively manner. If there's anything that you don't like, please forgive me. I'll thank you all first, and I'll thank you in detail later. Jiang Yi obtained first place in the monthly votes this month. As I said the day before yesterday, at least until now, Chidian's monthly votes ranking is still the greatest honor in the online literature circle. Now, we can say that we've had this honor. I really like the monthly votes ranking. I think there's no one who doesn't like it. It's not only the honor of the author and the book, it's also the honor of the readers. Because of my laziness, I've never thought about it. I'm sorry to many of my readers, including the sub-editors. At the beginning of the year, after careful consideration, I decided to change my attitude. I'll find a suitable time, when there's enough time and no chores to fight for it. At that time, I decided to do it in May. The reason was actually very simple. This month is Grandpa's 70th birthday. After writing for so many years and using Grandpa's character to swear, I wanted to make him happy. Grandpa is also reading at Chidian, and he's more concerned about the monthly votes ranking than I am. However, at the beginning of the year, I received a notice that there would be an annual meeting in May. Following that, Jiang Ye's readers would gather in Shanghai. I wanted to go back to my hometown in Hubei to celebrate Grandpa's birthday, so I didn't have the time to do it. So, I told Yun Kai that I definitely wouldn't be able to get it in May. I had to move it to another year before I had the energy to do it. Yun Kai immediately decided to resign, which put a lot of pressure on me. Indeed, I didn't want to fight for first place in the monthly votes. Then, why did history go on this track? At the beginning of the month, on the 1st of May, coincided with Qidian's double monthly votes period. Jiang Yi wrote about Yen Sei and Guang Guang turning to ashes, and Sang Sang holding ashes. When I wrote it, I felt that it was great. It wouldn't be worthwhile if I didn't canvass for votes at this time, so I opened a separate chapter to canvass for votes. I knew I would get a lot of monthly votes, but I didn't expect that I would get so many monthly votes. Even though I became the monthly votes rankings first, I didn't think it would last for long. Because I had a lot of things to do in May, I knew I wouldn't be able to write much. Even my readers didn't think it would last for long. According to them, I would be satisfied if I could stay on for a minute. But at that time, I thought that it would be best if I could maintain it until the old man's 70th birthday on the 8th of May. So, I shamelessly issued separate chapters to canvass for votes. You don't even need to say that I actually managed to maintain it. Then, it became what everyone saw recently. I was forced to go crazy. I had no choice. Seeing everyone working so hard to cast monthly votes, canvass for votes, and even tipping so many people into monthly votes, I couldn't help but go crazy. Because I couldn't even convince myself to drop the ball at such a time. That was a behavior that deserved a beating. Let me say something sour, but it was very true for Jiang Yi, me, and you. This time, the monthly votes rankings first place wasn't mine, but yours. At least, it should be said that you forced me to do it. I thank you. Thank you for forcing me. I hope that you will be as happy as I am tonight. Previously, I said that I've been working like crazy this month. In fact, this isn't the most I've written in so many years. It's not even the most I've written in the past month. But I can say that I've really done my best. I've really worked very hard to write. I've done this with a clear conscience, and I've done it with a clear conscience towards all of you. This month, I spent half a month drifting abroad. Needless to say, I was tired from the long journey. In fact, I went from Yichang to the annual meeting. After returning from Shanghai on the 20th, I had a personal matter that made me waste 2 days. But I really used all the time I could spare to write. On the 25th, I suddenly found out that Broken Car had its annual inspection this year, but it didn't pass that day. On the 27th, my rhinitis actually flared up. It hurt for a whole 5 days, and I suffered for 5 days. But I still had to desperately write and explode. These days, I've been really bitter to the extreme. You probably can't guess when Broken Car will have its annual inspection. It's this afternoon. I found a proxy company. I don't have to go myself, and I can try to write more. Because the proxy company asked me to drive the car to their company, I was afraid that I would have problems driving during the day. So after writing those 5 chapters late last night, I dragged my tired body, changed my clothes, and drove the car to the entrance of their company. At that time, the northeast sky was already bright. It seems to be literary. Take it back. At this time, the battle for the monthly votes has ended, so I can tell you these things calmly without worrying about being criticized. I'm reporting these bitter things one by one just to let you know that I really worked hard this month. The first monthly vote you cast is valuable, and it's worth it. I know that it's hard for you, and it's very sad. Fortunately, this kind of hard work has finally paid off, so it's also worth it. If the first place in the monthly votes counts as a military medal, then we finally have one on our chests. No matter what happens in the future, we can always take it out to be happy, right? Please allow me to once again literary this military medal to you first. There are many names that I won't list because it's impossible to list them all in a single chapter. I thank you, you. Then, I give this military medal to the old man, because I've been a playful guy all my life. Apart from the small contributions I've made to the family's finances because of your love for me in the past few years, there's actually nothing for the old man to show off, so I give it to him. Then, I give this military medal to myself, and to my wife, who has been having a fever these days, but still insisted on cooking instant noodles for me every day. Why are the two of us so bitter this month? Don't tell me that there's only one military medal. My eyes are blurry at this time, so there are countless of them, and I can give them everywhere I want. Finally, please allow me to talk about something more serious. Yesterday, after I finished writing 5 chapters, I drove to the agency late at night and saw the first rays of dawn. Lying on the bed, I picked up my phone and nervously scrolled through the monthly votes rankings. That's when I saw Tomato's single chapter. To be honest, I was very emotional at that time. Perhaps many people would say that I'm pretentious, but I really wasn't pretentious, because I was really emotional. Back then, I was also in the same situation, and I was very distressed. Even though my body was already in such a state, I couldn't say it unless I was desperate, because I would be ridiculed by many readers. I shouldn't have written all this, but I couldn't help but write it anyway, since I'm old and thick-skinned. Alright, I still deleted a lot of paragraphs. The general meaning was that after so many years, it wasn't easy for everyone, and the monthly votes rankings were both good and bad at the same time, so the readers should understand and not fight. In this battle for the monthly votes, Tomato and I didn't fight for it. Maybe we did fight for it, but because we liked each other, and because we were the rare ones on Qidian who had Saturdays off, we appreciated each other and resolved the conflict. But what if it was with other authors? What if it was with Pai, Ear Root, Uncle Guan, Potato, 72, Chen Dong, Third Young Master, and many other authors? What if it turned out to be a fight? The circle of authors was only so big, and we were all otakus. There were only so many people we knew and admired. I was really afraid of causing some unhappiness. In other words, I was a bit clingy, or rather, homesick. Anyway, that was my personality. So, I really loved and hated the monthly votes, regardless of whether I was pretentious or not. These days, I have been thinking about these things, so I couldn't help but say it. If I disturbed everyone's happy mood, please forgive me. Do you still want the monthly votes next month? Of course, do you want them like this month? Of course not. I'm not saying that I'll die of exhaustion. Seeing all of you working so hard, I also find it odd. Having said all this, to prevent some readers from thinking that Tomcat was cocky after getting first place, I'll first say that in May, I updated nearly 180,000 words. That was considered diligent. In June, I guarantee that the number of updates won't be lower than that. It will exceed 180,000 words. That's considered a good attitude, right? I'll write another chapter in a while. Good attitude, right? I'll apply for leave tomorrow, but I'll use the Saturday the day after tomorrow to exchange for leave. Good attitude, right? Finally, I'll repeat, I'm very happy. I hope all of you are happy too. Then, I'll bring my leader, no, it should be my leader, me, and my family's cat and dog to give a deep bow to everyone to express my gratitude. I promise everyone that I won't be much more diligent in the future, but I'll definitely write better books. I wish everyone a good night and a happy new month. It's June. Let me end with a sentence that everyone is so familiar with that they're sick of it. Please cast your precious monthly votes. Thank you. Another bow. Don't worry, there won't be a third. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian to cast a recommendation vote or monthly vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 351. Before the fog dispersed, a figure passed through the fog and arrived in front of Monk Guanhai, leaving a dim shadow in his eyes. This made the young Buddhist powerhouse's eyes, which had always been calm, finally show signs of nervousness. Looking at Ning Ke, who broke through the fog, Monk Guanhai did two things. He separated his palms and pressed the thumb of his right hand into his palm, changing from the Wisdom King Mudra to the Heart Mudra. His left hand changed from vertical to horizontal, with his palm facing forward. He faced Ning Ke in the most powerful posture of the Wisdom King Mudra. At the same time, his chest and abdomen suddenly contracted, and he took a deep breath to recite the Buddhist hymn. As the two Buddhist mudra complemented each other, the fog around him suddenly became chaotic. The milky white fog emitted the faint twilight outside the hall, as if different flowers were condensing in different areas of space. When the first syllable of the Buddhist hymn sounded from his chest and abdomen, the illusory flowers of the breath of heaven and earth suddenly condensed and began to float down. Some of the flowers broke into petals and fell like rain. Some of the flowers fell with their stems and branches, covering his body densely. These petals and branches contained the chi of heaven and earth summoned by the two handprints. They were also supported by the Buddhist hymns. Once they touched the enemy's body, they would explode and hurt him in anger. Compared to ordinary people, whether it was Taoism or Buddhism, the biggest advantage of cultivators was speed. When ordinary people did not see the light clearly, they would be pierced by the flying sword. When ordinary people did not have time to dodge, they would be smashed into bloody corpses by the rain of flowers. Of course, Monk Guanhai knew that Ning Ke was not an ordinary person, but he was sure that he had made the right choice in the face of his opponent's strange attack through the fog. Compared to ordinary people, whether it was Taoism or Buddhism, the biggest advantage of cultivators was their speed. When ordinary people did not see the light clearly, they would be pierced by the flying sword. When ordinary people did not have time to dodge, they would be smashed into bloody corpses by the rain of flowers. Of course, Monk Guanhai knew that Ning Ke was not an ordinary person, but he was sure that his choice was right in the face of his opponent's strange attack through the fog. Unfortunately, he forgot one thing. The so-called advantage of speed or the speed of time could only be reflected by a certain distance. At this time, Ning Ke was less than a foot away from him. When the beautiful flowers of the breath of nature slowly floated down from the fog, and Monk Guanhai's hands were still pinching his fingers to form the emblematic gesture, Ning Ke made the simplest move and punched the monk in the face. 2 streams of blood spurted out. Monk Guanhai coughed painfully. The Heart Mudra in his left hand and the Wisdom King Mudra in his right hand dissipated. The breath of heaven and earth flowers that had fallen from the fog also dissipated. Finally, the fog dispersed. The clouds dispersed, and the Taoist hall became quiet and spacious again. Ning Ke slowly withdrew his fist. Monk Guanhai wiped the blood off his face. After a moment of silence, he said, "I lost." The melted ice melted into snow water and flowed slowly in the cracks of the dark wooden floor. There was a faint tinkling sound. Monk Guanhai raised his head and said with emotion, "Mr. 13 is indeed the successor of the divine talisman master. Your use of talisman Taoism is unimaginable." The 4 consecutive talismans had their own ideas, and they came in sequence. It was like the beginning and ending of a beautiful essay. The last move of abandoning talismans and using fists showed that you understood the true meaning of battle. Now that I think about it, I was indeed overestimating myself by challenging you. No wonder you were so hesitant in the beginning. I guess you didn't want me to break my spirit. Ning Ke had indeed shown mercy in the end. With the abundance of the Great Spirit in his body and the strength of his body, how could he only make Guanhai's nose bleed when he punched Gu Shi's head like a smashed watermelon? But in fact, he had won by luck. Ning Ke had used too much psyche power to use 4 talismans in a row. However, it did not matter to him because of the psyche power in his sense of perception. The key was that the Great Spirit he had attached to the first 3 talismans had directly squeezed out all the Great Spirit in his body. After using the disperse talisman, he had forcefully broken through the fog and launched a surprise attack. His body was already extremely weak. If Monk Guanhai had not chosen to use the most powerful Buddhist cultivation method to deal with it, but instead used his body to resemble the solemn Dharma idol of the Wisdom King to strengthen his defense, he would have been the first to fall if he had held on for a while longer. Ning Ke looked at Monk Guanhai, who had sincerely admitted defeat in front of him. He secretly felt lucky. Although this monk from the Lank Temple had a high state, he had been living in seclusion in the mountain temple to study and read Buddhist scriptures all year round. It seemed that he did not know why to fight. He suddenly remembered what Yi Hongyu had said in the basket when they left the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine. Most cultivators in the world do not know how to fight. It is very easy to defeat them. It is a pity that my cultivation is not enough. I did not see the legendary no-boundary spirit of the academy. Monk Guanhai was still sincerely reviewing the previous battle. The more sincere his attitude was, the more Ning Ke felt his face burn. He thought that when he refused to fight with him on the street, it was not because he was afraid of bullying the weak and dampening his spirit, but because he was afraid of losing and dampening his spirit. Ning Ke reached out and helped him up. Monk Guanhai thanked him and then said with slight confusion, "But I still don't understand how you avoided the raindrop that I flicked out." "You should know that the raindrop was soaked with my fighting spirit." Ning Ke smiled slightly and did not say anything. He slowly recovered his spirit. Monk Guanhai looked at his expression and could not help but say with shame, "I am presumptuous, presumptuous." He thought that Ning Ke must have used some kind of unique skill of the academy to quietly block his attack. That kind of unique skill was probably at the same level as the no-boundary spirit. Wasn't he prying into the secrets of the academy by asking so rashly? Ning Ke smiled and shook his head. He helped him walk out of the hall. In fact, only he knew how he had responded to the raindrop. He did not do anything. He just lowered his head and let the raindrop fall on his forehead and then seep into his hair. That raindrop did indeed contain a very powerful force. However, Ning Ke had always been very thick-skinned, especially after joining the devil. The Taoists outside the main hall of the Southern Gate Taoist Temple had been silently watching the inside of the hall. This was the first battle of the new generation of disciples of the academy after entering the human realm. Some of the white-haired old Taoists could not help but think of the academy madman with the surname Ku many years ago, who rode a little black donkey into Chang'an and caused a bloody storm. Their emotions were very complicated. The door of the Taoist temple had been tightly shut, and no one dared to peep from the window. The spectators only saw the fire raging in the hall, and the dryness spurted out from the cracks in the window. Then there was the sound of rain, and water flowed out from the door. Then there was a chill coming from the hall, and it seemed to suppress the winter outside. Then there was the Buddha's aura, and the solemn Buddhist hymns, and then everything returned to silence. There was silence in the hall. No one knew what the final result was. Did Mr. 13 of the Academy win, or did the last disciple of the Elder of Lank Temple win? Mo Shanshan stood under an old tree outside the hall and looked at the Taoist temple. When Ning Ke consecutively used 4 talismans, her eyes suddenly became extremely bright. When the Buddhist hymn sounded in the hall and the light of Buddha could be seen faintly, her eyes began to show a look of worry. When the Taoist temple returned to silence, she had probably guessed the outcome and returned to calmness. Because she knew that people like Ning Ke might be defeated or killed, but they would never be defeated or killed quietly. Chapter 352. The night-shrouded Chang'an City. The everlasting lamps in the corner towers of the imperial palace radiated a yellowish light to the ground. The dim light reflected the white snowflakes dancing slowly in front of the red palace wall. It was a very beautiful scene. This was the most remote part of the moat. The snowflakes falling from the night sky disappeared silently when they fell on the surface of the moat. In this quiet environment, the sound of their feet stepping on the loose snow became clearer and clearer. Mo Shanshan gently brushed away the fluttering hair in front of her eyes and looked at the dancing snowflakes in front of the red palace wall. She said softly, "The great river is far away in the south. It's almost impossible to see snow there." Ning Ke thought of the distant country where it was like spring all year round and said with yearning, "I really want to visit it if I have the chance." The great river is small in size and has a small population. Its national power is very weak. To the north is the powerful South Jin, which has always had a bad relationship with Yueluan. However, it has always been able to maintain peace and even prosperity for hundreds of years. Do you know why? Ning Ke shook his head. Mo Shanshan looked at the Tang Imperial Palace in front of her and said calmly, "Because there is the Tang Empire and this Imperial Palace in the world. Because the Great River has been on good terms with the Tang Empire for generations. That's why the Great River has always been under the protection of the Tang Empire, even though we are separated by thousands of mountains and rivers." Ning Ke was very clear that what she said was the truth, but he did not understand why she suddenly mentioned it. Both the South Jin and Yueluan know very well that if they go too far and their troops really invade the Great River, the Tang Empire and the Emperor in this imperial palace will not stand idly by. That's why other countries in the world think that the Tang Empire is an ambitious hegemon and the source of war. Only the people of the Great River don't think so. For us, as long as the Tang Empire exists, this dangerous and chaotic world will be peaceful. Mo Shanshan looked at him and said with a smile, "The world of cultivators is actually inseparable from the secular world. Only by being strong can you ensure the peace of the Tang Empire and the Great River. What you need to do now is to strengthen yourself and make the Tang Empire stronger than before." Hearing this, Ning Ke finally understood. At noon on the street outside the Ministry of Rites, Shanshan probably guessed that he was hesitating and wavering, so she used the snowflakes outside the palace walls to comfort him. He shook his head and said, "Thank you for your explanation. In fact, I've almost figured it out. If you want the world to be at peace, you can't just avoid fighting. I just don't understand why a Buddhist master like Monk Guanhai can't get rid of those foolish thoughts. Why does he have to come and fight with me? When people see a tall palace wall, they always want to go around the wall to see what's behind it. When they see a mountain, they always want to climb it to see what kind of scenery it has." Mo Shanshan pointed at the palace walls on the other side of the moat and said, "Cultivators are also people. They also have curiosity and yearning, and because of their pride, this feeling will become even stronger." Hearing this, Ning Ke thought of the state of mind when he first heard Chen Pipi talk about the real powerhouses in the world. He thought of the heroic attitude he had when he saw the mountains on the other side of the Sea of Clouds after he successfully reached the top. For cultivators, the end of the long road of cultivation is the legendary unknown place. They are in awe of the unknown place, but they are filled with the desire to approach or even surpass it. Jishou Abbey and Xiankong Temple have nowhere to go. They can only see the academy, so they have to try to climb the mountain of the academy. In the light snow, Ning Ke and Mo Shanshan held the big black umbrella and walked forward. The topic about the academy's entry into the human realm and the challenge was over. They looked at the thin ice floating on the surface of the moat and the snowflakes that disappeared as soon as they entered the water. They often kept silent for a long time, and occasionally discussed about talisman Taoism and calligraphy when they felt something. They had been through life and death together in the wilderness for many days and had developed a tacit understanding. Recently, they often traveled side by side in Chang'an City. This tacit understanding gradually penetrated into every part of their body and even their soul through the gentle touch of their shoulders, and the girl's hair occasionally drifted past Ning Ke's nose. Their common interest in talisman Taoism and calligraphy made it easy for them to perceive the intention of each other's gaze and gesture. That happy and peaceful emotion gradually emerged. When they walked to a certain bridge in the moat, the snow gradually stopped. Ning Ke stopped and put away the big black umbrella. Mo Shanshan took a few steps forward and then looked back at him. With this movement, her black hair flowed down from her shoulders like a waterfall. Her white dress looked especially beautiful in front of the red palace wall, just like the falling snowflakes earlier. Ning Ke looked at her beautiful face and tightly pursed red lips. He found that her eyes did not drift away at all, but were unprecedentedly calm and focused. He could not help but feel inexplicably nervous. Mo Shanshan looked at him quietly and said, "In the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, I said that I like you." Ning Ke was slightly startled and squeezed out a sentence with some difficulty. The battle between Ning Ke and monk Guanhai in the main hall of the Southern Gate Taoist Temple did not cause any disturbance in the secular world. In the eyes of the ordinary people living in the streets and alleys, cultivators were like the cultivators in Ning Ke's eyes in the past. They were all immortals who lived in the wind and drank dew and flew around the clouds. Whenever immortals fought, as long as there was no disaster, mortals were usually not willing to care. In fact, they didn't know about these things. But for the various sects in the cultivation world, the result of the battle had a far-reaching impact. The defeat of Guanhai, the last disciple of the elder of the Lank Temple, proved once again that the academy was the highest peak in the world, and also made Ning Ke, Mr. 13 of the academy, enter the ranks of the so-called powerhouses. Monk Guanhai lived in seclusion in the deep mountains behind the Lank Temple in his early years. He was not famous, but even I would have a hard time defeating him. I didn't expect Ning Ke to be able to defeat him. It seems that he has improved very quickly recently. I think now, no one on the Peach Mountain still thinks that he defeated Long Qing twice because of luck. In a dark room in the West Hill Divine Palace, Yi Hongyu looked at the dossier she had just received. A smile appeared on her beautiful face. For some reason, she did not wear her iconic red dress, but a simple Taoist robe. A subordinate of the Judicial Department of the Divine Hall heard her words and could not help but frown slightly. He retorted in a low voice, "No one can deny that Mr. 13 has improved very quickly. But it is definitely luck that he defeated the prince twice in a row. If the prince was not at the critical moment of breaking the realm on the snow cliff, how could he have succeeded in his plot?" Yi Hongyu looked at the subordinate quietly and said, "Plot is also a kind of battle. Since you have become an enemy, do you still expect the enemy to be tolerant and gracious? As long as it is a battle, it is fair. And you must remember that Haotian is also fair. A shameless guy like Ning Ke can become a student of the second floor of the academy and be chosen by Uncle Yen Sei as a successor. Then he must have something worth learning other than luck." The subordinate of the Judicial Department did not dare to refute anymore. He lowered his head and said yes. He went out and walked to a tree by the cliff. He glanced at the simple stone house and revealed a sneer on his face. He lowered his voice and said to his companion, "The Divine Hall has suffered a serious setback in this trip to the wilderness. In this trip to the wilderness, the Divine Hall has suffered a serious setback. Prince Long Qing may have died. Our Grand Master Yi has encountered a strong enemy and was forced to lower her state. I'm afraid that she will never enter the knowing destiny state in this life. But she still shows such confidence in front of us. Doesn't she know that this is pitiful and ridiculous?" Yi Hongyu was indeed seriously injured in the trip to the wilderness. Especially when Lian Sheng used the practice of Tao Tai and forced her to lower her state to survive, it had caused irreversible damage to her cultivation. But she was after all the Tao addict and her cultivation state was still in the upper see-through state. How could she not hear the whispers outside the house? However, she did not get angry. She just gently tidied up her wide green Taoist robe and then silently closed her eyes. I was happy the whole day yesterday, but I suddenly withered today. Maybe I was too relaxed and felt extremely uncomfortable. It was even more uncomfortable than when I tried my best at the end of last month. And I happened to be writing this terrible plot, so I actually wrote for 6 hours. It's so scary. This is the only chapter today. Don't worry, I won't wither. I will definitely write more tomorrow. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 353. The West Hill Divine Palace commanded the hundreds of millions of believers of Haotian Taoism in the world and worshipped the spirit. They needed to stand on the soil of reality, especially the judicial department, which was the most realistic place in the divine hall. Yi Hongyu's future as the Grand Master was covered with a layer of gloomy dust after her repeated failures in the wilderness. That was why her subordinates, who used to be in awe of her, dared to talk about her in private now, and she became quiet. There was a simple Taoist temple deep in the mountains in the south. Not many people knew about this Taoist temple, and the old plaque outside the Taoist temple said Jishou. Different from the West Hill Divine Palace that ruled the world, the Jishou Abbey, hidden behind the history of Haotian Taoism, did not care about the secular world. There were 7 huts by the lake in the Jishou Abbey, which enshrined the legendary 7 volumes of the Tomes of Arcane. The 4th hut was already in a state of emptiness. It had never been able to bring back the Biming hand scroll that was lost in the wilderness. The thatch on the eaves seemed to be withered and decayed. The other 6 huts seemed to be infected by the aura of the Tomes of Arcane. The golden thatch on the eaves seemed to be carved out of gold, reflecting the sunlight and exuding a sense of luxury and solemnity, which made people want to kneel on the ground and never rise again. On the agarwood table in the first hut by the lake, there was an ancient book with a cover as black as blood. This ancient book was so thick that it looked like a piece of natural black blood stone. It was the hand scroll of the Tomes of Arcane. The black cover and snow-white pages made this heavenly book release a feeling that made people's hearts palpitate. The hand scroll on the table had been opened, and it was even more likely that it had never been closed for thousands of years. The first page was completely blank, and the second page was on the right. The name of the Sage of Sword, Liu Bai, was clearly displayed at the top. Not far from the horizontal were the 2 words Jun Mo, and around it were words like Yi Tang. A cool breeze blew in from the window and flipped the pages of the book like an invisible hand. It quickly flipped through the heavenly tome and came to the last page. Last summer, Ning Kei's name had appeared here after he successfully climbed to the top of the academy and comprehended Talisman Taoism on a stormy night. But now his name had disappeared. The paper was as white as snow. The wind from the lake lingered between the beams and pillars of the hut. When it met the walls, it turned back and flowed to the agarwood table. It began to turn the pages again, but this time it was turning from the back to the front. The pages of the book were turning very fast. Occasionally, he could see 2 or 3 names clearly, such as Liu Qingchen. But most of the time, he could only vaguely see a few single characters, such as Lu and He. The wind on the lake flipped the hand scroll and finally came to the position of the first few thin sheets of paper. The paper was densely covered with names, which looked as beautiful and complicated as the patterns of flowers and plants. Prince Long Qing's name was in the corner of the page, but the handwriting was so dim that it seemed that it would seep into the soft paper at any time and disappear. Tang Xiaotong's name appeared in another corner of the page. The handwriting was erratic and sloppy. Mo Shanshan's name appeared in the middle of the paper. The handwriting was quiet and smooth. The names of Wang Jinglu, Monk Guanhai, and many others could be seen on the paper, making it look a little messy. Only the top of the paper, near the edge, was blank. Only Yi Hongyu's name was in that blank space. Yi Hongyu's name appeared lonely and proud there. The handwriting was so thick and dense that it seemed that it was going to emerge from the paper and fly away with the wind from the lake. The top stroke of the word "you" had even gone beyond the edge of the page. It was like a sharp Taoist sword stabbing into the front page. Ning Kei's name appeared inconspicuously in the bottom right corner of the paper. In the early morning, on the meadow outside the academy in the southern suburbs of Chang'an, Mo Shanshan looked at Ning Kei and said softly, "I'll write to you when I return to the Great River. But your name doesn't look good no matter how I write it." Looking at the girl's eyelashes shining in the morning light, Ning Kei said, "We're not leaving Chang'an right away. Why does it feel like we're saying goodbye? We'll write to each other when you return to Ink Lake. But I'm thinking that I can take Sang Sang to the Great River to see you when the headmaster of the academy comes back." Mo Shanshan lowered her head and looked at her shoes that were sticking out of her skirt. She thought to herself that this person probably never noticed her habit of speaking. However, what right did she have to change his habit? The two walked on the meadow. Under Ning Kei's introduction, Mo Shanshan followed him to visit the academy. Then they walked through the wetland and the old library, through the thick fog, and came to the cliff. Just like when Ning Kei came to the back mountain of the academy for the first time, the calligraphy addict was also shocked by the beautiful cliff, the peaceful lake, the mountains, and the waterfall in the distance. She looked at the scenery in front of her and said, "Is this the real academy?" Ning Kei said, "If the second floor of the academy is the real academy, then this is it." Mo Shanshan said softly, "For cultivators, the unknown place is above the clouds and out of the secular world. They can't touch it." Although the academy is the only holy land that connects both worlds, how many people can come here and see the scenery with their own eyes? I didn't expect that after meeting you, I would enter the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine first and then come to the back mountain of the academy. I'm really lucky. Ning Kei stood beside her and looked at the lake and mountains in front of him. Hearing her soft sigh, he felt proud and happy. He said, "You met me, and there will be many more lucky things in the future." Although he said it casually, there was a hint of sweetness in it. If they stayed together for a long time, there would naturally be more. Mo Shanshan was not used to this situation. She lowered her head shyly and said nothing. Ning Kei had always been thick-skinned, but he was not embarrassed at all. He took her to the Mirror Lake and said, "I will take you to see Seventh Sister." Except for her, the other senior brothers all like to play hide-and-seek. It is really difficult to find her. Mo Shanshan thought to herself, "Is this the sect to visit?" She could not help but feel a little nervous. She looked down at the mountain road under her feet and slowly followed him. She said softly, "Is it inappropriate for you to bring outsiders into the academy?" As a man, the most appropriate answer at this time should be, "You are not an outsider." However, Ning Kei was thick-skinned and good at talking, but he had no experience in love and seriously lacked ability. Hearing Shanshan's worry, he answered honestly, "Eldest brother has already taken you as his sworn sister. What is there to be afraid of in the academy? And it is eldest brother who asked me to bring you here today. Otherwise, would not be so bold." When he crossed the Mirror Lake, he greeted Seventh Sister and chatted with her for a while. Then he went to visit Fourth Brother and Sixth Brother in the iron-making house by the stream. Sixth Brother, who was used to being half-naked, was startled when he saw Ning Kei suddenly bringing a beautiful little girl in. He hurriedly put on a coat faster than he swung the hammer. Fourth Brother, on the other hand, sat silently by the window and deduced, as if he had seen nothing. The iron forging house was unbearably hot and full of steam. Thinking that Shanshan was after all a girl who loved beauty, Ning Kei only wanted to talk with her for a while and then leave. Unexpectedly, when Shanshan saw Fourth Brother's deduction by the window, she refused to leave. Instead, she walked over and squatted down to carefully look at the talisman lines on the sand table. Her expression became more and more serious. Ning Kei's expression slightly changed and walked to the window to watch together. After a long time, fourth brother raised his head and glanced at the girl squatting beside the sand table. He indifferently asked, "You also know talisman?" "Do you want Miss Shanshan to squat like this all the time?" Ning Kei felt very innocent, but he continued to be silent and brought a stool over. Mo Shanshan didn't thank him or even look at him. She directly sat on the stool, holding her chin and focusing on the sand table. She occasionally discussed with fourth brother and then continued to focus on the sand table. The next chapter should be written at about 11 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. But everyone knew that even the headmaster of the academy praised her profound knowledge and vision, so they hoped that she could resolve the current stalemate. There is one more chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation.